passing down at Dr. Oh, pass this
All right. Time is now 6:30, and I'm going to call this meeting of the Ridgefield City Council to order. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Mayor Pro Tem. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Ms. Julie, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Davis.
Present.
Councilmember Favela. Here. Councilmember Wells. Here. Councilmember Burkle.
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Chipman.
Here.
Mayor Cole.
Here. Okay. Mr. Stewart, are there any late changes to the agenda?
No late changes, Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on to public comment. It is now time for public comment. Anyone wishing to address the City Council regarding items not subject to a public hearing may come forward at this time to the podium or use the raise hand feature located on the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. For controls over the phone, press *9 for raise hand and press *6 to mute or unmute. Please state your name and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Good evening. My name is Judith Reel. I'm here to talk about how the chaos in the District of Columbia might be affecting us as a city. And I'm here to ask the city to report to the public on the potential effects of the federal government freezing payments of federal grants. And they are freezing payments of federal grants that have already been awarded but not yet funded. Briefly, the federal government awarded grants and they're now refusing to pay them. The Smith Tower Rehab, $10 million frozen. Fulbright scholars are stranded in Europe because their grants are not being paid. And I read about a farmer who got a federal grant to improve his business operations. He literally took out a loan to pay for improvements to the land, and now the government has frozen that and is not paying him, and so he's personally liable for the work that was done. My questions are there any outstanding federal grant applications by the city of Ridgefield? And if so, what are the projects and the amount of funding requested in the status? 2, are there any grants that have been awarded to the city but not yet funded? If so, what are those projects? So should the city halt work on those projects until after it receives a guarantee that the federal monies will actually be paid? Otherwise, the city could be liable for costs that it expected would be paid by federal funds. 3, are there projects in the planning stage that would require federal funding, say improvements to roads or infrastructure? And if so, what are those projects and are they threatened? Do we have any employees whose salaries are being subsidized by federal grants? Or, for example, from state funds that are paid for, that originate with federal monies? For example, if we use funds from the state for clean water positions and the state gets those funds slashed from the federal government, as it appears they're going to be, what's Ridgefield's plan when that money dries up? And lastly, I always like to talk about the YMCA. I noticed that for other buildings, they often apply for federal funds for capital construction. They're not likely to kneel and kiss the ring. They're not going to be disavowing support for diversity or equity or inclusion, so they're likely not to be getting any federal funding. Does that affect their plans with respect to Ridgefield? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else tonight wishing to give public comment? Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Heather Gordon. I live at 627 South 25th Place. Counselors, mayor, staff, I want to express my sincere hope that the city of Ridgefield will preserve existing native trees, shrubs, and plants when moving forward with new housing developments. I understand this is an issue you are now considering with respect to a new development near Carty Road. Why is it so important to preserve our existing native landscapes? It's easy to understand that a full-grown healthy tree takes decades to establish. We can't get these plants back anytime soon. Maybe more importantly, these plants and trees, these native plants and trees, are doing amazing work for us in Ridgefield right now. They're hosting essential pollinators and wildlife that support our agriculture. They're filtering our air with their bark, mosses, and leaves. They're providing slope stabilization, and they're creating a healthy soil system that removes toxins from our watershed. And listen, they're all doing this without supplemental water, special maintenance, or even costly inputs. They aren't irrigated. In addition to these health benefits, they also provide beauty and shade that local residents can enjoy. These benefits will not be restored for decades if lost. The removal of native ecosystems in Ridgefield is part of a national trend that has led to insect and bird population declines that threaten the overall health of our environment. Scientists following this trend are greatly alarmed about the rapid decline of insects and what it means for agriculture and human health. Native plants and trees help out in a way that is unique and unmatched by our traditional landscaping efforts. The Ridgefield Heights development directly across the street from me installed some native plants 3 years ago, and none of them are thriving. Shortly, the developer will be out of the picture and the HOA will be stuck with the problem. I'm providing photos tonight of a 3-year-old native Oregon grapes installed in Ridgefield Heights, and with them you'll see a picture from my own yard of a same age Oregon grape, where I've done nothing other than care for it, plant it correctly, and get it water. Well, a developer will say it's cheaper to replant with natives than to protect and work around existing native plants. One must ask, cheaper for whom? Certainly cheaper to their bottom line in the short run, but not cheaper if the whole cost of replacement is considered, including the decades it takes to replace a mature native tree, and not cheaper if we calculate in the lost fresh air and water filtration services. Not cheaper to members of the HOAs when the developer landscapes fail. I ask you to really consider making Ridgefield a city that does things differently, putting our native trees and healthy ecosystem ahead of the expedience of developers. Let's have developments that use and benefit from our existing native trees and plants. It would be a win for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to give public comment this evening?
Mike Jackson, Clark Cowlitz Fire Rescue. I'll keep it brief as I know the chief has a presentation with an update on the district coming in an upcoming meeting. But I just want to give you a quick update on ambulance service. As you're probably aware, we started ambulance service in January with the fire district, and you've seen our rig around town, I suspect. With that, as we've discussed before, we pick up the highest priority calls. If you call 911 and it's an emergency medical call, it's rated in one of 5 categories. 3 and up are lights and sirens, emergency type calls, and the lower priorities are a slower response. Our system right now, we pick up the highest priority calls across the fire district with an ambulance that's based here at our station in Ridgefield over on North 65th. Our goal with that was to reduce response times. We were seeing response times from AMR in the 90th percentile, around 23 and a half minutes towards the conclusion there with that. So we still have AMR ambulance service and they still service the district, although with ours, when our unit's available, we pick up the highest priority calls across the district. So those priority 1 and 2 calls, right now with our unit, we're covering about 80% of those, and AMR is picking up the rest of those. With those 80%, we've been able to shave about 6 minutes off that response time. Granted, that's across the district, so that's from the far reaches of our district to here in Ridgefield. With it stationed in Ridgefield, obviously those response times in town, we're still oftentimes in that 20-minute range before, now much closer to a 6 to 7 minute response time. So we're pleased with that and looking forward to continuing that service. The Cowlitz tribe has been a great partner, providing the physical ambulance and helping to support us to get 2 additional ambulances. And as we move down the road and we have data on billing and collections and that, we're going to look at the possibility to expand that service with an additional ambulance to further impact those highest priority calls. So that was all I had, unless you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Chief. Anybody else wishing to give public comment this evening? Miss Julie, anybody online?
Not seeing anyone online, Mayor.
Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the consent agenda, council? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to our first order of business of the evening, we have the approval of resolution number 660, downtown parking plan. Mr. Green, over to you, sir.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, Council, and honored guests. I'm here to present for your consideration the culmination of about a year and a half of effort, the proposed downtown parking plan. And I'm not going to revisit a lot of what went into this that you heard last time or saw last time. Essentially, we're here looking at a plan that can be implemented, create some additional parking, focus on the downtown stakeholders, that's businesses, residents, and those who want to play in downtown Ridgefield, and kind of pick up from what's happened in the last few years as far as developments and non-developments and de-developments, and where parking can be recovered in some of those. I want to go to the next slide. So I'm just going to launch right into it. We have, based on the last month's meeting, a number of decision items that go into the plan. And Mr. Stewart, I'm not sure if we want to, or Mayor, how do we want to handle these? Do we want to do one by one items, or is this kind of captured in the final motion as far as these items?
I was actually going to ask you, because I was looking at that as well, but what I would probably suggest is that we go probably section by section, so third, fourth, angled, and I know there's other stuff, but maybe that's a good way to go, because I think that, I suspect that council might have feedback, unique feedback on each one of these.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you want to start with that?
I think it's okay.
Yeah, it's up to you, Mayor, Council, whether you would like to kind of start with the individual aspects that we're going to need decision points on, or whether you'd like to start with like the broader plan and then go to the specifics.
Yeah, I was gonna actually suggest, like, before going forward, like, you know, I know there's a slide in here about the current situation and then a proposed plan, so we can see that and audience can see that, and then we can kind of go back and do
All right.
each one of those. Does that work? Does that work, Council? Okay, let's do that.
Okay, so Jill, if we could have that first of the maps, it's toward the back of the presentation. So this is our current situation. And I'm not going to focus on every block, but essentially we're focused on the core, which is Pioneer, Main, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, essentially. The current situation is, in the last few years, the Pacific Wood Treating Plant has been closed, cleaned up. The route that was used to take poles in, a pole truck route, was up 3rd and down Division Street. That no longer is needed. There's a number of no parking areas along those streets that were established that way so pole trucks could get through. Since we no longer have them, there's no longer a need for those no parking zones. There's also along in front of the rack here, the old no parking zones from when this used to be the Union Ridge Elementary School area. Since that obviously is up the block, there's an existing no parking area in front of this building that is no longer needed. Actually did talk with the school district about their interests, and they said we're okay with removing that and opening up for parking for users focused on this building, as long as we didn't block sight distance of people trying to get out onto the street. The issue on our 5th, for example, Ridgefield Mercantile has a gravel parking area along 5th, but there's really no definition as to how you're supposed to park in there. And they've requested, can we post that for angle parking, which actually helps define and gives them some additional parking, because every so often people do parallel park and block 3 parking spaces doing so. 4th is probably one that we spent the most time in, because people have complained about getting out onto Pioneer from 4th and the lack of sight distance doing so. And so we have multiple options that we're going to ask for council decision on tonight, as far as do we convert that to one-way with adding some parking in that street, or do we keep it 2-way and do some sight distance improvements at Pioneer? The other big item that came out in this is that there is a lack of on-street ADA parking, and so we've taken an extensive look at that, and you'll see one of those decision items is that on-street ADA, how we can gain more spaces with that, as well as a loading zone. We've had requests for a loading zone on Main Street in front of the hardware, in front of the convenience store. As of this morning, I had more recent input from that that I want to bring up when we get to that point in the presentation as well. So this is the current situation. We have several issues that we've been studying through that. And before I go into those decision items, I just very briefly covered the current situation. I was wondering, do you have any questions before I go into those, or anything I didn't cover?
Council, any questions about the current situation for downtown parking? Okay.
All right, so the next map actually shows the proposals. It's a little busy because in some cases we have alternatives or options for these proposals. But as you can see, a lot of those yellow boxes are focused on those decisions in the downtown core, on Pioneer, Main, Fifth. It does also point out we have a CDBG project that we have received a grant approval for on South Sargent Street that would add parking along that block between Main and 3rd. The blue boxes on this are what we'll consider the longer-term future study options that are part of this plan, just recommendations or options for future study, such as what happens with the downtown the waterfront development in the waterfront park and amphitheater, and if we do build that Division Street multimodal crossing over the railroad, that provides a non-motorized or an alternative way to get from downtown to the waterfront. But it also might bring about some demand for parking in the downtown area for events at the waterfront, and a good way to get in. The other option that we've talked about before is what about a municipal parking lot, public parking in downtown more than what we have now. We do have one, and that's at Davis Park. We have the Ports property along Railroad that is available for public parking. We really don't have any signage that tells people that, and so that's one of the options to consider in this downtown plan. In all, when you put all these pieces together on this map, the plan does bring about 10% more parking in the downtown core than we have now.
Great, okay.
So Mayor, Council, now that you have kind of the bigger picture, would you like us to kind of go through some of those decision points that are already and that are identified on this map then?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay,
Let's
perfect.
do that.
All right, so let's go back to that first decision slide. I'm going to start with 4th. As I mentioned, we spent some time with the neighbors along there and assessing the situation. And we have kind of two options that the neighborhood seems to be a little split on. One option is to convert it to one-way northbound, very similar to 5th, where it's one-way to Simons, and you take Simons to get either to 3rd or to Main to come back out. The issue with 4th and Pioneer is there's sight distance issues trying to pull out, and there's parking on the street just east of that intersection that's contributing to that. The other issue is during school hours when parents are dropping off their kids at Union Ridge. Traffic backs up through that intersection, and so if you're trying to pull onto Pioneer, you're pulling into traffic to try to make that maneuver. And so that was the root of the one-way proposal, to make it one-way northbound like 5th. There is room in doing so to create some angled parking and some parallel parking on there to add several parking spaces in that one block area. Again, it would be one way for just that one block section. You take Simons to get back out like you do with 5th. The other option then is to keep it as two-way, remove 1 or 2 spaces on Pioneer. And the neighbors suggested, well, let's add a convex mirror to that so you can see oncoming vehicles to help improve that sight distance coming out. So those are the two options that are on the table for council.
Okay, great. So I think it'd be good to go through those two options and have council discussion there before moving on. So council, where do we want to start here? We can start, at the far end and we'll work our way over. Councilor Hamilton?
Yes, hearing all that information and having been a Union Ridge parent to pull out of that area, I think that it is stressful and it's hard to see. I'm in favor of the one-way street.
Okay, great. Councilor Burkle.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I had a conversation this morning after the Main Street meeting with a person from the floral shop, which is on the corner of Pioneer and 4th. They are very in favor of one-way north on 4th. I too think that is the most appropriate and for me the safest way. Convex mirror, yes, but you really can't see how far out the oncoming car is, in my opinion. So, one way north on 4th. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you, Councilor Burkle. Councilor Wells.
I agree with the one-way north on 4th.
One way north. Okay.
Yeah, I
And
do too, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Favela. Yep. And then Councilor Davis.
I guess my one question is, how common is it to have two one-ways back-to-back heading in the same direction?
Well, I can tell you that downtown Vancouver did that several years ago with their kind of alternating one-ways with Main, Broadway, I think, and C Street.
Yeah.
But they did change course for other reasons, where business requested it for circulation purposes. So it's unusual, but I would say hasn't been done ever. But in this case, this would be, in some instances, cities have looked at doing these in a limited manner for the safety purposes.
Yeah.
Which is what this is.
Does it open up other safety issues, do you think, with maybe if somebody turns north on 5th, they're like, oh, I got to loop over a block because they're used to just being able to then hang a left on the next one and then, oh, it's another one or whatever. I mean, I obviously will have signs up, but I'm just trying to get an understanding of that because that's my only concern. I think from all the other elements point to that's probably the best solution, but it's like then we got two back-to-back streets that are both going one way the same way.
I did take a closer look at that. I talked to Chris Griffith of the school district a while ago about that because right now what parents do when they, those that do drop off in some way at Union Ridge, then they circle back to come back on 4th to Pioneer. But then they're also coming in, they're the ones coming into that line of traffic on Pioneer trying to get back out. So the issue would be that I looked at was if people do north on 4th and then they would turn left on Simons, go to either 3rd or Main, what does that do to Main and Simons or 3rd and Simons? I just don't see the level of traffic that's going to cause major backups.
Okay.
But the benefit of the sight distance is significant when you look at what they're experiencing now.
Okay. And then I guess the last question I have is it going to be one way just for a block to Simons? Is there going to be northbound on 4th all the way from like Division all the way down to Simons and then it is do not enter, or how far up is the one way going?
Right now, the proposal is just to Simons, just like.
Just to Simons, just for the block?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So that would be like what we see right now on 5th, where like you go a certain point and then it, like it's right before
Yes.
you turn on
And
Simons.
the same coming southbound on 5th, you
Yeah.
have these signs that say turn right or, do not enter. That would
Yeah.
be the same setup.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
A couple other questions, Councilor Burkle.
Just one more comment from the floral shop this morning. If we remove the two parking spaces east of 4th and north on Pioneer, they lose 2 parking spaces for potential customers. If we go one way north on 4th, they're very, very comfortable with that. Thank you.
My only comment is Ridgefield thinks outside the box. And this is outside the box thinking. It seems the best for the circulation. And so that's the reason I think we're going with two one-ways to eliminate a bunch of problems.
Right. I guess my only comment, I guess what I was going through with this, I had initially kind of penciled in option A, but I was most concerned about the Ridgefield Floral. And it sounds like, and I was curious what they were going to say about that, so it sounds like they're very much in favor of that, and I think that's the business that most impacts. So I'm a Union Ridge parent. I drop kids off, and my little shortcut has always been to go down Third, skip Fourth, and go down Third, and so looks like everyone's going to find my shortcut, but if we do that, I think this is, yeah.
You got longer legs.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have consensus on Fourth then, so we can move on to North Third Avenue.
All right, so Third, when we go to that slide again that talks about, I know we're going to be kind of going whiplash with this. As I mentioned last time, the port is looking at redoing the Greeley building, remodeling or other measures to open that up. And one of the proposals was on-street EV charging stations in front on Third. There was a couple of questions there about our understanding is they were looking at a 10-year grant for maintenance of those. I did look around and see, last time we talked about City of Portland with their experience with on-street EV charging stations and public parking spaces. I did check around. There are a couple of jurisdictions other than Seattle and Washington. One is Mount Lake Terrace, the other is Port Orchard. And in fact, Woodland even has in their parking code allows for on-street EV charging stations. Woodland doesn't do much else other than say that they can be. The other two do have some more restrictions and make sure they're using it, they're plugged in, they're not just parking there and using the parking space. So I did look at those. So the options here are, do we, other than opening the spaces on Third that are currently no parking, which is part of this plan, about the EV charging station proposal. At the time, last month it was looking at on-street there, or just do we continue to focus on an off-street space like the two spaces we have at Davis Park now? And so that's that decision item.
Okay, great. And can I just ask, before we move on to council comments, a clarifying question? And so like the 3 bullets here, is this all about EV charging? Because it says like, keep on-street and then require moving to off-street location. Is that referring to EV parking right there?
Yes, that's the only option here. I mean, the only decision item. Last time we talked about just in kind of a blanket, let's get rid of the yellow curbs along there and open up for public parking. There seemed to be consensus on that. So
right.
This was the action item that we brought forward.
Okay. Okay, great. Council, so we'll start at the my right, far end with Councilor Davis, and we'll work our way leftward.
Yeah. So I guess the port, they got a grant for that, right? So would there be any expense on the city's behalf for giving us the green light?
My understanding is the grant would cover the cost of installation. It would cover a maintenance period for 10 years. Okay. After that, the grant runs out, so we just don't know. The question that came out of last month was, okay, they could have on-street, but do we need some type of ordinances to make sure that one, these spaces aren't just taken up by people parking an electric car there and leaving it the whole day? Yeah. Do you have to be actively charging? How much are we experiencing at Davis? And I think we'd asked Mr. Johnson to. We don't have that. So we have 2 spaces at Davis Park. There's obviously grants that we can go after, at least now with state grants to go after, to add some EV charging stations there. And it's you're 3 blocks away, 2 blocks away from this location. And even with the municipal parking lot, you could build one and build in some EV charging in an off-street setting.
And then I guess I don't have an EV, so I don't know how exactly this works, but I guess it's a 2-pronged question. One, do we have the electric infrastructure to be able to feed the requirements for that location, and I guess who pays for the power? I mean, I know a lot of it's like, you know, like the Tesla network, it's built in, or the consumer pays or whatever, but is this like hosted charging, or is this like they pay it, like all that?
So the power would need to be brought in from the overhead lines on Third. My guess would be that they would be metered, and the meter would be charged to the port for the electrical costs in that setup.
Okay.
Just for your edification, Council, we actually have two different methods of recouping costs in this city already, where the city of Ridgefield worked with the Tesla supercharger installers to have universal chargers put in. For those, the people using the charger actually pay the costs of that electricity. For the Davis Park charger, the decision was made by council that the public benefit associated with getting people to come downtown and to shop, that there should be some sort of, that would be free charging for them, but only for a number of hours. So there's 2 hours of free charging, then the user is charged after that time frame.
Okay.
So different methods can be employed. This is not, it would be something the port would be making a decision on.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilor Favela?
Thank you. I've spent some time kind of driving around downtown. I walk and run downtown almost daily, drive by Rosars and Costco daily. There's charging stations at Costco, there's charging stations at Rosars, there's charging across I-5 at the, the bus, the park and ride. And then we have Davis Park. I have driven by on the weekends, early in the morning. I've never seen any of those full. The whole reason why we're working on this parking plan is to increase parking. And I feel like it is not a smart decision to take away parking for the majority of people just for EV charging on the street. So I am not in favor for any of them at all.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm of the same mind as Councilor Favela. I haven't seen a lot of usage of the stations that we have, and so I would be very hesitant to give up 4 or 5 of our new parking spaces that we're going to get for EV charging stations that maybe only a couple people would use.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you. Councilor Wells.
I've got a question. The grant that the port has gotten, that's not site-specific? Isn't it anywhere in the port area? So I guess for them, parking spaces alongside of the building there on Third, could we revisit that down the road and see whether we really determine we want to have them put there, or the port can put them someplace else on one of their port properties or down by the Lake River?
So, Council, last time that this issue came before you, there was a conversation that was on this point of, is it site-specific? Is the grant only site-specific? And the information we received from the port was that no, the grant was not site-specific, and then if it was not allowed by the Greeley building, that there is potential that those EV charging stations could be moved down to the waterfront. It's something that I'm happy to get together with the port officials and talk that through about what the options might be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions, Councilor Wells?
No.
Okay. Councilor Burkle, we'll go to you.
Just a question. Do we have any idea what the population of electric cars would be in Ridgefield?
I don't have it for Ridgefield specifically, Councilor. I do have it for Clark County. And in Clark County, 1 in 78 people in Clark County own an electric vehicle. That compares to King County, which is 1 in 35. Snohomish County is 1 in 58. So just for the larger urban counties, it is 1 in 78 in Clark County.
Just another comment. My kids both have electric cars. However, they charge them at home overnight, and rarely do they use an on-street charging station for whatever that's worth.
Okay. Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. I agree with Councilor Favela and Mayor Pro Tem Chipman. I think the whole point of this conversation started to add parking spaces, and I think that it's premature for the city of Ridgefield at best. When I looked at the map, and there are a lot of options within a short period, like a short space. So I feel like the option is there for people, and it's not necessary when we're trying to add parking downtown.
All right, thank you. I guess just along the lines of that sentiment, I just had a wild idea. I'm going to throw an idea out there, and this is, this is half-baked, but, most of the time you park, if you see EV charging spots are exclusive, like you go to Rosehars, it's EV only can park there. If it was on street, would we entertain an option to say it's just like optional, like if you have an EV, that's a place to park, or if you just have a big old gas guzzler, you can park there as well. It's just optional, but it doesn't take away parking spots, but it gives EV chargers an option. Probably some obvious pitfalls with that, but I just thought I'd throw it out there.
If I could interject, if you were to direct us to move forward with an on-street proposal, it does require an ordinance and a code update for the parking code. If you say, no, not at this time, then we don't need to do anything. We can come back at a future time if there's additional considerations for that consideration.
Yeah, okay.
I want to go back to the electricity. So you said it would have to come from a main line. So would we be tearing up the sidewalk? What does that look like?
Right now, what I've heard from the consultant team that's the architects are designing the building is that it would just come in from the overhead lines. There'd have to be transformers put in there. There will need to be rebuilds of the sidewalk because it's got some substandard panels, but it's not because of the EV charging, other than where they need to attach the chargers into this concrete. But everything's coming from above, so they're not needing to drill and put a conduit underneath because they're coming from up above.
So when it comes to, so I remember when we did this a couple years ago for Davis Park, and we said we were going to make it free. Did that require an ordinance or anything, or was that just kind of like a consensus? We said we're not going to charge, and if we were to do something different here, would that require sort of a differentiation in policy?
I'd have to go back to be 100% certain. My memory of it is that it did not require an ordinance. It required a motion for approval to approve the placement of the EV charging stations in Davis Park and how to charge for that. And then it was brought back to you because originally it was going to be free to charge for as long as you needed to charge. And then we had experience with users hanging out there longer and having to plug in and charging for longer periods of time. And so then we revisited that with council and again, just sought approval of limiting that to 2 hours, but it was not done through ordinance. The ordinance for this would be with respect to the on-street parking, if you're limiting that. If in your suggestion, Mayor, there is not a change to the on-street parking, then that wouldn't require an ordinance, but what we would need to do is have an agreement with the Port of Ridgefield because they would be placing infrastructure in the public right-of-way.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Councilor Wells.
One other comment I'd like to make. I attend the Port Commission meetings, and one of the comments at the meeting that the building, the Greeley building, is not being looked at as something that's going to be developed in the real near future. So it'll be down the road a ways, and maybe we could readdress that parking area at that time.
That's good to know. Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm all for having more EV charging stations. I just think that the trend is like we're 1 in 78 right now in Clark County, but I think it's going to just keep trending upwards. We did an ordinance last year that was, additional EV charging requirements. I think we're getting there. I think just at this time, I'm not ready to endorse on-street EV charging one way or another. It doesn't, as council, it looks like the consensus is pretty unified there. Yes. Okay. So I think we can just mark that as we'll just kind of, maybe we can come back to it in a later date.
Yeah, defer that.
Yeah.
But it would still be, we would still put in the public parking.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Keep the
Yes,
public
yeah.
parking, but no EV charging on street at this time, right there. Okay.
All right.
Let's move on to angled parking.
So last time there was a question of, well, and it kind of came up in a couple of parts. One is the discussion about ADA parking spaces. And maybe this is a little in the wrong order, but the question is if you've got on-street ADA parking spaces, they're nearest the crosswalk, you still have to get out into traffic to get your wheelchair, either get the wheelchair on the sidewalk or out on the street to get up to the crosswalk. And so the question is there an angled parking alternative that would allow you to have kind of angled ADA parking, which is what you have at Overlook Park. You have one space there now. Or keep the current plan and maybe look at this option in a longer term picture, such as when the Port's waterfront develops their own transportation plan for the area and how traffic would circulate then. So that's the considerations. I believe Mr. Stewart showed you kind of a quick concept of what angled parking would look like on Simons and on Main in that block heading down to Pioneer. The conclusion that I had was it doesn't gain you any parking spaces, but it does allow you to gain a little bit of like a space for an ADA parking. However, it's pretty much a wash in total.
Okay. So, council, the options before us are just convert portions of Simon and North Main to angled parking, and then, or we can defer action to the Porch waterfront development transportation impact analysis. Any questions or comments on this one? We'll just kind of go around here. Councilor Favela?
Yeah. My initial, it's not an initial reaction because I've been thinking about this for a while, but I think we need to defer until the transportation impact analysis happens, because I do believe we're going to gain information from that, which will ultimately impact Main Street. So I'm hesitant to make any decision right now. I think it would be best for us to get a better picture before we kind of make any of those changes.
Other comments or questions, council? Councilor Burkle?
I've spoken with a number of people in the city regarding one-way Main Street from Simons to Pioneer, and it's not really being well accepted. I think I've lived here 21 years now, and Main Street is kind of special to me, and I like it the way it is, and I am not in favor of making Main Street one-way south.
Okay. Councilor Davis, anything?
No, I was just going to say, I agree with Councilor Favela's position about waiting for the Port's transportation impacts, just because I don't want to have to go through and make changes again. I'd rather just be prudent, and I don't see there as being anything that's pressing.
Okay.
I would agree also. I think it's best to defer. It's going to be such a huge change to the city. To get more information, I think, is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I would rather see the data, the supports, some potential solutions. I feel like I don't know if I don't see the data there just yet. I think it's too much of a disruptive change. So I think we should just wait, defer action until we get to the Port's waterfront development transportation impact analysis. Yeah.
I got a question for Councilor Burkle. You said moving Main Street, you weren't in favor of it going south. Which Main are you talking about, South Main or North Main?
North Main.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, council, any other questions or comments on this one? Okay, I think we have our direction on that one, so we can move ahead.
All right, next one, actually, Julie, if you could go to that map of the proposed plan and toward the end. What you see is, it's kind of a little tough to point out, but you see a bunch of squares on that map. Those are squares where, in my look about the ability to put on-street parking for ADA, it would be designated ADA parking spaces. Those are the locations adjacent to a crosswalk or a wheelchair ramp that meets ADA standards. So this would add approximately 5 or 6 on-street ADA parking spaces in the downtown core compared to what you have now.
And those are parallel spots?
Those are parallel parking, all of them, yes. Except for, there's one at Overlook Park, you see a little square there. I know there's already a space. However, I've heard from several people who do transport children or students or others who are needing the wheelchair lift. The wheelchair lift that's on the sidewalk side where that parking space is now, it doesn't allow them to fully deploy the ramp. And so they asked if we could put another space next to it with an on-street, kind of the hatch mark, so they could deploy their wheelchair lift at a flat level. So it'd be to add a second space next to the current space at Overlook Park.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Council, what's our perspective on this one? I'll just bounce around here. Councilor Burkle.
I today went down and looked at Overlook Park, and yes, we do have one handicap spot there. Could we add 2 more? My thinking is that's the heart of downtown. Within a half a block or a block of that location, you have virtually everything you want to visit in Ridgefield. I look at the 2 handicap on Pioneer and I go, wow, that's a pretty darn busy street. It's narrow. Are those the most appropriate places for 2 handicap? I really think we should consider, or at least I would like to have consideration given to 3 handicap spots at Overlook Park.
Question for that on you for you on that. Would that mean that you would add 3 spots right there? Would you take 2 other spots from other parts of town, or are you saying in addition to
I would remove the 2 on Pioneer and move those to Overlook.
Gotcha.
You're a reasonably short walk from Overlook to both of those locations, and I think it would be much safer.
Okay. Councilor Davis.
Yeah, I too kind of had a little bit of a pause, like Councilor Burkle did, about those 2 spots on Pioneer, just because of how tight it is anyway. And I really just, I think about people that need to like assist and just the time it takes. I mean, even for those of us that don't have that element in our world, you're scurrying, right? And I understand the logic of adding them to in front of Overlook. How many spaces do we have down there, angled parking spaces total?
Run down and count.
Yeah, the parking expert, Mr. Stewart, says there's about 15. So that would actually, you would need to eliminate 2 spaces for each ADA because you need that hatched area for the van or the vehicle to drop off the wheelchair.
I'm looking at it on GIS is why I'm looking at the numbers. And there is the hashed area. There's a southern entrance into Overlook Park, and so there's a hashed area between 2 parking spaces now.
Yeah.
That the parking spaces on either side are not ADA. So there may be some room to move using that because there's a ramp right there. It's already hashed there.
Okay.
There may be some opportunity with that for at least one addition without having to do much work.
Okay. Yeah, I just wouldn't want to limit too much of the, I guess, non-ADA spaces down there, but I like that siting as an option. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense.
The other option when we're talking about Pioneer, I am also looking at 3rd as you're approaching Simons because you do have recently rebuilt wheelchair ramps at 2 of the corners that, right next to El Rancho Viejo. That could serve as one of the relocated spots from Pioneer to there. And yes, we are redoing the sidewalk. We're not redoing the ADA ramps.
That lot right in front of Rancho
we already have a
Viejo.
ramp there,
Yeah.
and then if we're redoing the sidewalk on Simons as part of the Park Laundry project, then if you had somebody that had mobility issues and they were trying to get to, say, the post office or to Sportsman's or whatever, they'd have a better path there. And so it might be a really good spot, actually.
Yeah, and that will make it a much more accessible route when that's rebuilt.
Yeah, I would
Great.
support that too. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
I like that location idea. I think that that's a smart, and like Councilor Burkle was saying, that is still a centrally enough located place that people can get around. I think that adding something over there makes a lot of sense.
At Third and Simons?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so I talked to, there's a resident in town, and she's got a daughter who's in a wheelchair, and one of the things that she said when I was kind of talking to her about this was like the angled parking is huge. So I like the idea of more angled parking. But I think that, and then what she also said was it's, more spots, more ADA spots are great, but making them easy to get in and out of is also half the battle. So making sure that we're making these usable. So I'd support that as well. The one at Overlook, that is an angled spot. Yes. Okay. So is there a consensus around keeping this plan as is with the exception of moving one of the spots from Pioneer to Third and Simons?
So
What?
just if I might kind of feedback what I'm hearing, though, what I had heard was the two that were scheduled to be on Pioneer, take those off, and then put one at Third and Simons and add at least one, maybe two, in Overlook.
Okay. I'd say add one to Overlook. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing everyone else chime in. Okay, there's two on Pioneer, move one to Overlook. So there's two at Overlook at the angled spot, and then the third one would go to Third and Simons. Get that right?
Got it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, back to the bullets, Ms. Truly. So next one is loading zones. I do have new information on that one. Earlier I had talked with Scott Hughes about what's happening in front of the hardware. Did talk with the manager of the convenience store on the south side. At the time, it seemed like deliveries were mostly focused in the morning. Now, I've heard this morning that deliveries are not just focused in the morning, and that they're now spread throughout a weekday. So at least Mr. Hughes has requested, if we look at, instead of 8 to noon, 8 to 5 on weekdays, so it'd be public after that in the evenings, it'd be public on weekends. But loading zone, 2 spaces across the street from Ridgefield Hardware, and then 2 spaces in front of the convenience store that would be under that request to be 8 to 5. Here you see 8 to noon, and that's what we've been operating under before then.
Okay, can we go to the map for this one too? Let me see that.
Yeah, and it's hard to see, but there's kind of a reddish couple of spaces on southbound Main approaching Pioneer, southbound Main coming away from Pioneer.
Would there just be signage there that just denotes that like at 8 a.m. to noon? Is that what we'd say?
Yeah, it would be loading zone 8 a.m. till what you would like us to do. And then that's all it would need to say, because after those hours, around those hours, it'd be open to the public.
Okay, council.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment on that. The loading zones are great, and I say that we need them. But I hate tying them up from 8 to 5 every day and only used for an hour out of the whole 8 to 5 when that truck happens to be there. Is there anything wrong with maybe having a loading zone that you can use parking, but the hardware store uses cones now when a truck is anticipated? Could we turn around and accommodate something like that so we can use those spaces all day?
Yeah, the issue I have with that is public parking is controlled by the city government and enforced by the city government, not by somebody with a cone. Mr. Hughes did indicate that one of the other thoughts that he had was, can we put one of the loading zone spaces on Third? And then they can go around the block from Third, because Third has less utilization than Main does.
And if you look at the current loading and unloading, Third is used, just because we see it every day at City Hall, is that the east side of Third is used for loading and unloading for Zebra and Starliner. That's where they actually do their loading and unloading of trucks. So it is possible for some of those loads. I know that we have spoken with Mr. Hughes prior to now, and some of the shipments that Mr. Hughes gets wouldn't work to have them come in on 30, needs them right across the way because of the types of trucks that come in and the types of ability they have to actually move that freight. But to Mr. Green's point, we've had significant issues with some of the downtown merchants and some conflicts that have existed when people start trying to act like the public street in front of their business is actually private instead of public. And so you get competing interests of adjacent property owners. So using cones and kind of those methodologies, we're trying to get away from that in this plan. So if you want to talk about like limiting the hours, that's what we had talked about for both of those. We can look at actually having, different hours on each one. There's different ways to attack it, but we are trying to get to something systematic here.
Do they need 2 spaces each? Is that essential?
That was kind of based on the maximum need that they have, not an instantaneous need. It was just, as we were talking in generalities, that.
Like, is that to accommodate just larger trucks that come in there? Is that the intent? Okay.
Yep.
I thought, like on the east side of Pioneer right there, as you cross, as you start going down towards the waterfront, there's a little carve out right there. Didn't we designate that a loading zone a couple of years ago?
Yeah, that's the little cutout in front of Overlook Park. And that's really was meant to be used as an offloading zone when there's events at Overlook.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? How often are they getting deliveries? Do we have any metrics on how frequently these trucks are the need is there?
I don't know. I actually didn't ask that question. I know at the convenience store, I'm seeing deliveries quite often because there's perishables and frozen foods and other stuff that they carry.
In previous conversations with the hardware store, there's 2 to 3 a week that they are getting in at least. The convenience store, the Center Market, is getting them almost daily. Starliner gets them 3 to 4 times a week. And those are the 3 primary businesses that are really most impacted by the larger trucks needing to bring things in.
I think that the need for a loading zone is obviously there for these businesses. I don't think it needs to be 8 to 5. I think that's far too long. And I think as a business owner, there's potentially some responsibility there to schedule your things to be in accordance for what's most convenient to getting things delivered. So I'm all for, I think the 8 to noon or even tweaking that a little bit makes a lot of sense. But 8 to 5, like Councilor Wells says, I think doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Councilor Davis.
Just thinking outside the box, I'm trying to envision, because we're talking about 2 businesses that are essentially across the street from each other. South Second Place, is that an option or is that not wide enough? I don't think that what I would imagine would be considered North Second Place, which is essentially like an alleyway, doesn't seem like that could realistically have loading, unloading capability. But the south part, South Second Place, I understand it's not right next to the store and there would be street crossing implications for like the hardware store, but is that an option that would kind of take it off of busier streets and work?
Is Second large enough, excuse me, to handle a semi-trailer truck?
That's my question.
Make the bends and the
Yeah,
turns.
that's my question.
So the issue is getting in and out of South Second Place, is that the turn radius getting in and out of it is tight for garbage trucks. We have that issue with our food cart hub now.
Okay.
We've had that issue before the food cart hub with some of the residents in that live along there and actually take access off of that.
Okay.
That the turn radius and the width of it is hard even for a garbage truck to come in and out of there. And so we've had some issues with that. I think there might be some concerns of getting larger trucks in and out of
All
there.
right. Well, that answers that. All right, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Wells.
I have a CDL and a long trailer, you can't do it.
Well, so I guess on that same idea, then, like, looking at the one that is on Main, on, I guess, like the west side there, the way you'd have to get to that, I guess, if you're a big truck, you have to go north on 3rd and kind of go around the block. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But the benefit of that, because we did talk about, well, what if we put it directly in front of the hardware? That's a tight turn, going from Pioneer to turn north on Main. This one gives you the benefit of having a lot more road to use.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
And there have been a couple of incidents where trees have been taken out, and then you also can't see around the corner when they park on the east side of North Main Ave there, and so people can't actually take a right. They're going across into another lane when they're trying to go from Pioneer
I've
to
seen
Main.
that, yeah.
So that's why we can't have it on that side.
Okay. Okay, so it sounds like, Councilor Favela.
When they said that 8 to 5, was there a reason, like, we can't schedule these deliveries, like, it's impossible, this is messing with our business? Like, where did the whole 8 to 5 thing come from?
Well, the original 8 to noon and a request for a loading zone came because they had to put cones out just to get room in the morning for deliveries to come in. So this is a year and a half ago when we first had these conversations, can we at least get that 8 to noon period for those deliveries? I think you have more information.
A little bit, just in multiple conversations with the hardware store owner, a couple of their deliveries happen in the afternoon because of the route of the deliveries. And because they are a relatively small merchant, the route, they don't have as much say over what the route is for those deliveries. So there are a couple of their deliveries that happen 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they can't do anything about that, according to the hardware store owner. They've talked with them and said, they've been told, no, this is our route, this is how we have to do this. You're kind of the afternoon part of a longer route that this truck does. So that's a couple of theirs that they have in the afternoon.
Is that on specific days? Like, can they predict that that's on a Wednesday and a Friday? And I mean,
that's something I would want to go back. I would be doing it from memory, and I would much rather just simply ask the hardware store owner to, like, what's the schedule on that? I know he's told me, but I would be speculating.
gotcha.
Outside of the hardware store, what are the other delivery times? Have they specified? Is it afternoon as well?
Center Market and the other deliveries tend to be, they have specified that they get morning deliveries and that works for them.
Okay.
Okay. I'm thinking, I'm just almost, and I don't know if it would be a huge inconvenience, but 8 a.m. is such a hot time downtown. Everyone is trying to get to school, drop off, people are leaving to go to work. School doesn't start until 9 o'clock. So I'm wondering if they push that until it's like 9 to 3 deliveries instead of that 8 a.m. time where there's so much traffic circulating that area.
I think there's more traffic, but they're not parking during that time. Is that what?
Yeah, but they're it's chaos.
Council, there seem to be there's some unanswered questions, and you have some great questions, and I don't think we would be doing our job as staff if we don't get answers to these questions. So I might suggest that for this one, for this specific item associated with the loading and unloading zones, on the time of those and potential location, that we bring that back as a separate item to you, and we can do it on a short term. We absolutely can. This is something that is languished for a period of time, and we are hoping to get resolved for all those businesses and residents down there. But if it is your will, we can certainly get answers to the questions you are raising and then bring that back to you with clear answers of when do the deliveries occur for each one of those businesses. What are the opportunities to use third, and what are basically we can get some more detail for you.
I was going to suggest possibly grouping that into the waterfront traffic impact plan, but is that probably not?
I think for the purposes of the downtown merchants, that this has been an issue that it's been
so we want to do it sooner.
Something that your staff has been working with downtown merchants on for quite some time. So getting some resolution, I think, could be important prior to that plan.
Okay, so Council, are we okay deferring action on this specific item right here, and then we can bring it back on a short term if we need to?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Okay, good. We can move on then, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, next one is at Overlook Park, a proposal for a 2-hour time limit. This is one that appears to be more anecdotal than observed. We have been down doing a lot of observations of parking during the week. And the businesses that are there are doing a very good job of being able to turn over parking because they cater like lunch or dinner or a hair salon or wine shop. They're really short-term parking. It's not something that is going to cause people to go down and park for hours on hours to go eat a meal. The Overlook Park, as we've observed it, there might be some of the what we heard last year happening as far as people coming down and offloading a bicycle and riding around. For the most part, we're seeing use of, during the weekend, use of Overlook during the day for the park itself and eventually the splash pad. At night, it becomes, my wife and I were down Saturday night at the neighborhood refuge. It was very well utilized. But again, it was one of those that when people were done with their meal at neighborhood refuge, they drove away, found somewhere else to go, and spots opened up. So this is one of those that it was tough to kind of corroborate the anecdotal information we were hearing last year as far as the need to force a 2-hour time limit. I do want to note that it would be a little difficult to enforce because, as my understanding from our code enforcement officer, the ability to mark a tire and then come back 2 hours and see if that mark has moved is no longer available. And so it would be more of looking at license plates every 2 hours and see if they've moved.
Okay, council, questions or comments on this item? Councilor Wells?
I'm saying more tonight than I've ever said. What about putting the signs 8 to 5, 2 hours parking? And that would take care of the cyclists that come in and unload their bicycles and go on a tour of North County and then come back 4 or 5 hours later or 6, 8 hours later. And the 8 to 5 wouldn't interfere with the night activity down at the chapel area. So that's just a comment.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
Just because I recognize people are saying people are leaving, I'm downtown all the time. Like I've honestly never seen any multiple cars show up unloading their bikes and taking off. I don't think we have enough evidence right now to say that we need a 2-hour time limit right there. I just don't. And then eventually one day I heard we may have a water park down there, and do we want to limit 2 hours right there when their families are wanting to have fun and like hang out? So I don't think it's necessary, and I'm not in favor of it.
Okay. Councilor Burkle.
Just a comment, I spend a fair amount of time in downtown Ridgefield, and other than special occasions, is it difficult to find a place to park. Otherwise, I have been able to park anywhere I wanted to without any difficulty. First Saturdays, a lot of people in town, 4th of July, any special event, maybe there's something going on at the theater, Friday night, Saturday night would be difficult. But from my opinion, other than that, I have never, ever really struggled to find a place anywhere to park.
I find it to be unnecessary. I think you hear a lot of people like, we don't want Ridgefield to turn into Vancouver and all these things. And I think we're still that small town charm, like honor system, don't park there all day. And if people sometimes do, there's rule breakers in the world. But I think that it's adding an unnecessary thing. And like you said, I don't know how we're really gonna monitor that. And to add something there that needs monitoring doesn't feel necessary.
I would agree. And I'm one of the people that does park down there and goes for a run or rides my bike. But I'm usually back within a couple hours. So, I would not be a rule breaker. So,
I would say if you're not going to enforce it, then there's no point in having it. So, Okay, I think we have our consensus on that one.
Okay, I'm just going to quickly breeze over the next one because I'm going to circle back to a summary. The last October, you approved engineering standards updates, which for new proposals did not allow did not allow mailboxes, new mailboxes on Main and Pioneer in the downtown core, unless there's some overarching reason like accessibility. This code update we've talked about was to basically accentuate no parking near mailboxes, not just in downtown, but elsewhere. This would be a separate, separate item that would come to you in the future. It's more of a temperature check at this point, because we did hear about having lots of mailboxes coming in downtown on Pioneer, Main, and taking up all the parking spaces that could be there. The engineering standards kind of regulate that for now. We eventually will need a code, a parking code kind of reflecting that, but this discussion actually goes outside of downtown because they're looking at all the community mailboxes, and we are having a few complaints about parking in front of the newer community mailboxes in the newer subdivisions. And so this is more one, do you want us to come back with something which if you're so inclined, we can do that.
Council, is there an opinion on this?
Yeah, I'd like to come back.
Yeah. It's kind of where I'm at too, come back. It looks like we're getting nods, so yeah. Okay.
All right, so now I'm going to summarize. This is the plan. So on Pioneer, we would convert spaces along Pioneer in front of the rack to public parking. Extend yellow curbs at the intersections. If you notice, there's some intersections that have these yellow curbs to try to open them up so you don't park in there. And this is one that would allow, if we add a few feet of yellow curbs at these intersections, it allows boats with trailers to pull off in the intersection to allow cars going the other way to get around them. We're having some issues with that. This was in lieu of removing parking on one side of Pioneer, which it was one of the options early on with this. So that's with Pioneer. Fifth Avenue, we would delineate the gravel area on the west side in front of the Mercantile to angle parking. No time limit, just angle parking. There has been a request for additional ADA parking space along that street. We would investigate being able to put that in and not affect parking in front of the Mercantile. On 4th Avenue, I think we heard that the preference there was the option B, the one-way option. I think.
Yeah, option B.
B. 3rd Avenue, we would convert the yellow curbs to public parking spaces, and I heard a deferral of on-street EV charging to a future point in time. Next slide. Let's see, what is the next slide? Then with the loading zones.
We have angled parking as the next one. Angled parking.
Yes. Angled parking would be something that would be deferred to when the port's transportation impact analysis would be done for the waterfront. The loading zones is something that we would come back to you. I think we were looking at the next meeting or a future point in time. So at this point, if you wish to pull that part out of the downtown parking plan adoption, we can do that with direction to come back to you
Yes.
at a near point in time.
Okay.
And then on the last slide, these are the future considerations. Still part of the plan, but this is kind of more of, once you roll this out, here's some of the future considerations we do want to make sure we continue to address. And that's shuttles for large events into downtown. As you know, we did a C-Tran shuttle on the 4th of July. It was so successful that we had to ask C-Tran to add more buses. And so looking at some of the larger events to continue that as an alternative way, and maybe not just along Hillhurst, maybe coming in from the Park and Ride and other ideas. Wayfinding signage for the 2 public parking areas we have now at Davis and along Railroad Avenue, putting in signs that direct people there. We kind of have one now where Park Laundry is happening. It's on the fence for that project, but that fence is going to be coming down at some point in the near future, but we would want to put up signage. Assess ways to look at increasing the enforceability of parking. As I mentioned, that 2-hour one was is a little difficult for us to enforce it. Continuing to move forward with an assessment of a downtown municipal parking lot, and as I mentioned, with the waterfront, and possibly as part of the transportation impact analysis, look at the effect of the waterfront park and the waterfront development on downtown parking, and I guess I would say circulation with that angled parking discussion that we had. I think I've captured everything in here.
Yeah, there's the 2 things, just to clarify too, ADA parking, we're going to remove the 2 spots from Pioneer, add 1 to 3rd and Simons and 1 to Overlook.
That is, yes.
Yeah, and then we are going to defer any action on a 2-hour limit right now. And then my other question is, I seem to remember, and maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but last meeting when we were discussing this, wasn't there talk of removing? Did we talk about removing 15-minute parking zones in Pioneer, or is that just going to stay the same?
That is currently allowed in code for the city manager to identify 2 spaces per block in the downtown core on Main and Pioneer.
Okay.
We haven't talked about removing that element.
That wasn't part of this. Okay, I dreamt that. Okay.
We are going to go ahead with angled parking though on 3rd, right? And 4th, where we change those to one-way?
On 4th, yes, that would, we would, with the conversion to one-way, we would look at, and it probably needs a little bit more design, engineering into this as far as the angled and the parallel parking, but we would look at what we can do to get spaces in there. They'd be public parking spaces that would go in.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Council, we have this downtown parking package. Sounds like it's built. Is there any other discussion on this? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve as amended by council.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve Resolution 660, adopting the downtown parking plan as amended by council.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the downtown parking plan resolution 660 as amended by council. Any further discussion, council? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to our next item of business is the approval of resolution number 661, the master fee schedule update. Kirk Johnson, you're up, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Claire Lust. Okay. I saw Kirk's name first, and that's an egregious error because it's not alphabetical.
Same thing, it's fine. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council and members of the public. The agenda item before you is proposed update to the master fee schedule. So in the February 27th council meeting, Mr. Johnson and I requested policy direction from council on cost recovery related to land use, engineering, and building development review and inspection fees. Council directed us to update the fee schedule to reflect a 100% cost recovery policy, including full cost recovery of all third-party reviews. So the result of that is before you in the proposed fee schedule update. It is an overall 10.4% fee increase for those fees that were subject to the study. We did some discretionary rounding in there. You know, if a 10% increase made it $126.17, that's $125. Keep things nice and clean, but that is what is before you this evening. Thank you.
Okay, council. We looked at this a couple weeks ago and previously to that, and that's where we landed is 100% cost recovery on. So, any discussion on this topic or questions for staff? Looking around. Councilor Burkle.
The only thing I hear over and over is the time it takes to get the documents approved. And I've been told that that could be a particular problem when the documents are put out to a outside firm, that could sometimes take weeks. And from what I'm told from developers, time is money. So for whatever that's worth, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, council? If not, I would entertain a motion to pass this new master fee schedule.
Mr. Mayor? Ooh, Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 661 as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, the motion on the table is adopt resolution number 661 as presented. Council, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to our next item of business is the motion to approve the purchase of real property at 813 Pioneer Street. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr.
Real
Mayor
estate.
and Council. What we have tonight is a request for approval, for the final approval. Council had already provided approval to sign a purchase and sale agreement pending that due diligence justified the purchase and all information was satisfactory to council and to staff. So what we're looking at is 813 Pioneer Street. That's the home that's for sale that's on the corner of Hillhurst and Pioneer. The purchase would be to have property for future traffic signals, potentially a roundabout in the future as the port does develop, and we do have a need to regulate traffic a little bit more. The list price was put out for $489,900. The final negotiated price is $487,000, which is $299.03 per square foot for the home. It's a 1,422 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. The lot is 9,586 square feet and zoned RLD 8. The idea is that it would be a minimum of 4 to 5 years before any traffic revisions would need to be done. So we will come to council for final decision on what to do with the home, which it has been discussed to potentially rent that out in the meantime. For values, the assessed value is $450,303. Appraised value, the homeowner did obtain an appraisal in December and provided that to us, and it is from a certified appraiser that we are aware of in the market. The appraised value was $487,000, which matches the negotiated price. We also had our broker review the appraisal and give us a broker's opinion of value, and they valued the home at $491,000. It was last sold in 2019 for $325,000. The prior sale before that was in 1999 for $129,400. We've done several items for due diligence. We reviewed the appraisal conducted by the seller. We received a broker's opinion of value and the tax assessed value. We also had an inspection conducted on the house and radon testing completed as well. There were some items that we looked at that we did want some repairs completed on the house if we do determine that we want to rent that. The homeowner has agreed to repair those prior to closing, which would be scheduled March 28th of this year. We also discussed the items that were flagged by the home inspector. We talked with him, our operations supervisor, myself, and our public works director all spoke with the home inspection team to go over some of those items we had concerns about. We also spoke with the city building official and building inspectors at the city to discuss those with no concerns on what was flagged, with all of those items being corrected prior to us taking possession. We also did talk with our insurance, WCIA, just to verify that there are no issues with insurance or any concerns about liability or any of that. And they indicated that there's no issues with that as well. With that, that's all of the due diligence that we did do. What we are asking is to authorize the city manager or designate to purchase a real property for the purchase price of $487,000 plus applicable closing costs, pending the satisfactory completion of the requested repairs, which they are working on currently and will provide us pictures and evidence that they have all been repaired prior to closing on the 28th. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Great, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Council, any questions for staff on this one? Councilor Wells.
Just one quick one. When was the house originally built? Do you have that?
1961,
61?
correct.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve the purchase of real property at 813 Pioneer Street for $487,000.
I'll second it.
Just point of order, do we want to include applicable closing costs? Okay. Are we good with that? Okay. So it has been moved and seconded to approve the purchase of 813 Pioneer for $487,000 plus applicable closing cost. Council, any discussion on the motion?
I did. Yeah, I second it.
Oh, you did? Yeah, you did
Yeah.
second. Yeah, okay, there is a, okay. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much, council. Our next item of business we will move on to is the first reading of ordinance number 1447, amendments to the Ridgefield Municipal Code, Chapter 8.18, Park Rules and Regulations. Mr. Crownhart, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you as well, Mayor, Council. And tonight, we will not be talking about parking, we'll be talking about parks.
Did I say parking?
No, you
Oh,
Oh, no, I was making a joke about it.
what happens when you run your mouth for a living? Yeah.
Wonderful.
You just have to realize every joke that Mr. Crownhout tells is a park joke, so.
That is accurate.
It's like dad jokes, but worse. Yeah, or better. Yeah.
That's the joy of being the parks manager. All right, so tonight we'll be talking about the recommendation coming from the Parks Board to amend Ridgefield Municipal Code 8.18, Park Rules and Regulations. This was part of the 2025 work plan that you set forth for the Parks Board, and they have since reviewed it and are providing it to you for recommendation for consideration. Our objective tonight is to review the proposed amendments, get your thoughts on the proposal before you, and make any adjustments that may need to come forth when we come back for a second reading. Slide. So with that, we'll go through some of the larger changes within the code to help simplify the kind of overall process. Attached with this presentation is also the redlining of the code itself with the specific language for these changes. The first set of amendments that we've got going forward for 8.18 is some operational amendments. First of which is to extend the rules to include the trails that we have in the city. So moving forward, that would be considered the rules for parks and trails. The second update is to adjust the hours of operation for our parks and trails to move from our current operating hours of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. My apologies for the typo on the screen, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. and shifting that to 1 hour before sunrise and 1 hour after sunset. The justification for this change is that having the park closed is based upon visibility and security. Therefore, adjusting it based on times of the year would help increase the security of the space within the park. This is a similar standard that we see within other jurisdictions within Clark County, including Camas, Vancouver, and the Clark County parks. And then we are also looking at some adjustments to operational and maintenance activities. These amendments would disallow the public from interfering with operations and maintenance activities. It would specify that if there are volunteers that would like to support our parks and trails within the community, they do have to have prior authorization to do such activities. This is to ensure that they are following safe operating procedures and they are not causing harm to themselves or to others while doing such work. And then finally, they would be distinguishing a difference between what are temporary improvements and maintenance and what are permanent and durable improvements to the parks. We do go through a master planning process for all of our parks and trails within the community. And we want to ensure that if we are making improvements to the park, they're following those master plans. So maintenance activities would have to fall underneath that temporary improvement. But if there are any permanent improvements to parks, such as placements of large trees, removal of large trees, updating playgrounds, those types of activities are going to require a action by Parks Board and then of course Council. Slide. Next on these amendments are the rules for park users. We've separated these rules into 3 separate categories. Those activities that would not be permitted in the park or trail under any circumstance. Those activities that would be permitted only with city permission through either a permitting process or prior approval, and allowing those, and also allowing for unique rules when needed based on individual aspects of park, and we'll go through some examples of those here in a moment. Those activities that would not be permitted within parks that would be added to the current list are the prohibition of any inhalant tobacco. This would include smoking and vaping within our parks. It would also disallow any marijuana use of any type within our park or trails properties. Second would be the prohibition of firearms or weapon possession or discharge, except as otherwise permitted under Washington state law. This is a standard that's seen across many other jurisdictions within the county and the state, and essentially it prevents individuals from carrying around weapons within playgrounds and spaces that are typically occupied by families and children. Those activities that would be only permitted with city approval would include fireworks in the building and operation of fires, the sale and distribution and consumption of alcohol, drone usage to help protect the birds that are nesting within many of our spaces within the community, activities conducted for private gain or profit, such as trying to conduct a business or selling products within a park, posting of signs or posters of any type. If individuals would like to post those signs, they do need to come to the city for approval first, and equestrian activities outside designated riding areas. This would help specify that there would be certain trails that we could allow horses on, but others that we may not. But the standard would be to have no horses on trails unless it is posted otherwise. Finally, this does allow for unique rules for individual parks based on their individual needs. Those would be created by the city manager or their designee with your oversight. For example, the Rourke is a facility that does operate after the sun goes down. Luckily, because we've got lots of lights up there, and when we installed some new ones last year. So, for example, that park would have an exception to allow free usage outside of those hours. We would just have to post those up. All right. Any questions on user rules amendments?
Council, any questions for Mr. Crownhart for the part?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So under the non-permitted activities, the prohibiting firearm or weapon possession, what are we classifying as a weapon? And except as otherwise permitted under Washington state law, are we saying like if you have concealed pistol permit, you're able to have your concealed weapon at the park, or are we saying that is not allowed at all? Where are we at?
The official language that's in the amendment is as follows: activities that are hazardous to others. Have in possession or discharge a revolver, pistol, shotgun, rifle, bow and arrow, crossbow, slingshot, or gas-propelled BB or pellet gun, spear, javelin, or any other weapon except in designated target range areas or as otherwise permitted under the laws of the state of Washington related to the possession of legal firearms.
And pepper spray or a taser gun is not listed.
That is not listed
great.
and would not be
Okay.
considered a weapon.
Okay, this is on, more unusual rule agreement amendments.
Yeah, so what I heard was if you had a concealed weapon permit, that you could carry it in a park?
You would still be able to have that within a park as it falls within Washington state law.
Okay, thank you. I have one other comment. I think there's an ordinance I think we need to look at and repeal. I do not know the ordinance number, but it was passed in 2000, and it's to right to possess and discharge firearms in the city of Ridgefield. Yep. Shotguns for bird depredation in the fields. Right, Lee? Yeah.
We'll look into that.
Yeah.
Huh?
We can certainly look into that, Counselor.
Okay.
And Counsel, for your edification, I think what Counselor Wells is speaking to is there was a crop depredation. There was an ability for master hunters to be brought in by farmers to get rid of the birds that were destroying their crops. And so there was an exception to the overarching rule in the city that you cannot discharge firearms, including shotguns, inside the city limits for that specific purpose. I do not recall where that sits in, where we left it in code. It's been quite a while. We'll look into it.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on user rule amendments? Councilor Davis.
Yeah, first I just want to say thanks, because I feel like this is like a logical evolution of a lot of conversations I got to be a part of when I was on the Parks Board. And, I know that this comes from a place of thoughtfulness on behalf of the board and staff. So I appreciate the clarifications on some of those pieces. Everything else I think looks great.
Okay, great. And just to clarify, you're going to go through additional, like the lease agreements and the naming
Yes,
next?
we've got
Okay.
2 more. I just wanted to give you guys a
Yeah,
break
okay.
to answer.
This is just, it's not fitting for now, but just an FYI, there's a House bill that is active right now, House Bill 1380, so just to keep an eye on it in case that does go.
We have been tracking that,
Perfect.
that
Okay.
bill, and we're paying attention to it.
Awesome.
Other parks directors across the state and I've been communicating about
Do you want to enlighten us what that is?
Thank you. Yeah, I will if you would like me to. Let me pull it up. Do you want the actual language?
Oh, no, I just was wondering what it's about.
I have it pulled up to Counselor.
Yeah, I have it. Okay,
Perfect.
go ahead.
You have it. Go for it.
Well, I did. It requires any city or town code, city or county laws that regulate the act of sitting, lying, sleeping, or keeping warm and dry outdoors on public property that is open to the public, and any enforcement of such laws be objectively reasonable as to time, place, and manner. And then it has some more detail requiring that any state law that regulates the act of sitting, sleeping, lying, keeping warm and dry outdoors in any capital building and lands, but that's more like they go into private stuff, but it really is, it will impact our parks, or if that bill goes active, then we need to make sure that whatever we're saying lines up with what the law is now saying.
Okay.
Well, and to clarify on that as well, to go further, the currently Ridgefield Municipal Code 8.17050 does address camping on public property. So it's outside of these particular amendments, but just so you're aware.
Okay, Council, any other questions on this one?
I needed one more clarification on walking in the trails 1 hour before daylight. Is that prohibited?
1 hour before daylight, it would be prohibited under these amendments, unless there was a particular rule for that trail.
Okay. I think we got a councilman that's going to be in violation because he's out walking at 5:30 every morning around the clock, summer and winter.
So, and just to be clear, these are trails, not sidewalks. So so stay on the sidewalk, Counselor, and you'll be all right.
Well, I'm a little bit worried about myself, though, because I do go on the trails.
What about the school track?
Okay, I think we can move on to lease agreements.
Wonderful. These amendments also
Lease
address user agreements that we have in place for the community to help clarify what those agreements may look like. The amendments address 4 particular types of agreements. The first being lease agreements, which is exclusive use of facilities. An example of this would be the storage shed that we have with Pacific Soccer League down at Abrams Park. Conducting business within parks. This is activity involved in the sale of goods or services. We've had multiple businesses reach out to us about potentially doing Tai Chi classes or activities within parks. So those would have to have some sort of agreement. 3 is concession agreements. This is the exclusive right to conduct business within a park. So for example, if this is the Raptors agreement at the Rourke for the concessions that they have for their games. And then temporary permits are the agreements that are in place for any reservations that people have within our parks, including special event permits. The language of this amendment does still allow for other types of agreements as those opportunities come up. They may be signed by the city manager or their designee and with approval by city council. Any questions on agreements?
I'll start on this one. Is this just cleaning up the existing code, or is this like is this all new? Like we didn't have anything about this previously?
We had stuff about this before. This is about cleaning up the language that was there before.
Okay, great. Council, any questions for Mr. Crownhart here?
Just a real quick clarification. So if there's an event that somebody pulls a permit for, like a larger event down at Abrams or something like that, and part of their plan is we're going to have some vendors down there, would the vendors need to pull different permits, or would that be under the umbrella of the entire?
It would be under the umbrella of the special event permit process.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments, council? I think we're good on that one.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now let's get to the really interesting one. Naming process amendment. So we have a lot of wonderful parks and trails within our community that reflect our values and the things that are near and dear to us. And so to have an opportunity for the public to engage with the city to help name these spaces is a unique opportunity that we're presenting for you today. The naming process amendment that's before you today has 5 specific steps to it. The first is what would take place at property acquisition. Before we can build something, we have to acquire property or purchase it. So once we acquire property, we have to call it something for us internally. So we designate a working name for a site once it is established. The next step, once we get further into the design and are getting closer to a potential opening date, the city would need to go through a public engagement process to solicit feedback from the community on what they would like this place to be known as. There would be a process through probably Ridgefield Roundtable on soliciting that feedback, and that feedback would then be provided to step 3. That information would be given to the Parks Board of Commissioners, who would then review all of that information and conduct a public hearing where we'd invite the public to come in and share their perspectives on naming this particular site. After they have taken in the information from that public hearing, they would then make a recommendation to City Council on what they recommend the name be, including all of the justification for that name. And they would also submit all of the public feedback and input that's been provided to Council for final consideration. Finally, Council would have the final and full naming authority for any park or trail within the city of Ridgefield. You would not have to follow the recommendation that comes from Parks Board. You can just take it into consideration when you go through that process. But you will retain the naming authority for that park. After the name has been approved by City Council, the park will be referred to that by city staff, and signage will be either installed or placed to reflect that change. Any questions on the naming process?
Council, any questions about the naming process for Mr. Crownhart? No? None? Okay, so, yeah. I just had one that I thought would be beneficial to add to this, and I want to thank Mr. Crownhart for kind of helping me research this today. There's several other jurisdictions in Washington that have this as well, and so it'd just be adding language, so as an item F, I guess, or under item F, it'd just be adding another bullet point underneath there. So it would just essentially say, a county or a park or recreation facility should not be assigned a name that by contemporary community standards is derogatory, offensive, distasteful, or in violation of generally accepted moral standards. And that helps us maintain the integrity of our naming process. And this is brought to me by several residents as well. They were interested in seeing that. So I think it's kind of a common sense amendment, but I think it's one to have it good to have in there. So that would be my proposal to include that. So, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We'll bring it in for the second reading.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Lastly, as we brought this forward to you, we really focused in on 3 priorities that we've heard consistently from Council and Parks Board. Those are that making sure that we are being good stewards of our park lands and that our rules reflect that. 2, that our park rules and regulations are inclusive and allow all users. and 3, that we find and create new ways to engage the public in our processes. So that's what we hope that these amendments are reflecting. Question for you is, do you concur or agree, or your thoughts and opinions on the overall amendments?
Okay, Council, what do we think about these 3 guiding principles here as we go through this process? Everyone's got, I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay, yeah.
For sure.
I think we feel like we're tracking with that. So thank you for all of your work to go through the cleanup and read, I'm sure, enlightening reading to go through code and figure out how to best arrange it so it's clear. So I do appreciate that.
You're very welcome. You got me to read about parks. I'm very happy about that.
It's the dream job right there. Okay, Miss Julie, would you please read the ordinance into the record?
Thank you, Mayor. Just grab that here. Ordinance number 1447, ordinance of the City of Richland, Washington, amendments to Richland Municipal Code, Chapter 8.18, Park Rules and Regulations.
Great, thank you. And this is first reading only, and we'll come back to council 2 weeks? Or are we going to longer?
We'll strive for 2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay. As soon as 2 weeks. Great. Okay, that concludes business for the night. We're going to move on to public hearing. And we have a public hearing now for first reading of ordinance number 1442. This is a second amendment to the Sanderling Park Development Agreement. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council and the community. The item before you this evening is the second amendment to a development agreement that was originally reached between the city and a prior property owner in 2008 to orient you to the property area. The property we're speaking to was formerly known as the Kennedy Farm. The approvals are known as Kennedy East. This property is directly south of the middle school and intermediate school on the east side of Hillhurst. And that is Sanderling Park is the name of the subdivision at this point. In 2008, development agreement and pre-annexation agreement was reached. That was first amended in 2017, including both the west and east sides of Kennedy. The 2008 development agreement has a section that provides that a park shall be provided that is 2.5 acres, and that the land value for that park shall be paid for by the city in park impact fee credits. Also in the 2017 development agreement amendment, the property owner agreed to dedicate that park to the city for use as a public park, and that the price per acre for that purchase would be $225,000 per acre for a total purchase price of $562,500 in park impact fee credits for the land itself. Also associated with the 2017 development agreement amendment, there was a trail development that required the developer to construct a system trail for the city of Ridgefield, as shown in our Ridgefield Parks Comprehensive Plan, through the park, that such trail is eligible for park impact fee credits. One of the key components with all of this is that for park impact fee credits to be granted by the city to a developer, there must be a benefit to the public, and as such, it needs to be recognized in our parks capital facilities plan, our trails capital facilities plan, and there must be an ownership interest that rests with the public in perpetuity, such that it is an ownership interest and not a gift to the developer for that park impact fee credit. Beyond parks and trails, there is also a traffic component that was addressed in the 2017 development agreement amendment. That was to create what is known as the South Collector. And if the city clerk could bring up Exhibit D to this item in the packet, can show it to you a little bit better, both the park, trail, and, as well as we're doing it, the transportation improvements. Exhibit D. There we go. Perfect. What you're looking at there is Sanderling Park. You can orient yourself to, on the left side of that sketch, you see Hillhurst, and then going east from Hillhurst, that is the Sanderling Park subdivision. The middle of that area, of the subdivision area, is an old farm pond, and on the northeast side or northwest side of that farm pond is the primary area for the 2.5 acre park. There is a trail going through. You can see the dotted line. There's the T25 trail that goes through the site and connects to the west to be able to connect properties on the west side of that. And then on the south side of this, you can see the South Collector. The importance of the South Collector, not only for the subdivision and the area, but for our system and our future connections, is that this offers a potential opportunity long-term to connect to the southeast, ultimately connecting to the 219th Street interchange as part of the South I-5 Access Project. This is why that was added in at that time, was just to give a potential location. Now, how you connect from the stubbed roadway on the southeast corner of this subdivision over to 219th is yet to be decided, and it is a long-term project. It is not something that is part of what you have before you. But again, as the city looked at it, it presented an option, an opportunity we would not have otherwise. And it takes you about a third of the way from Hillhurst to the I-5 interchange. So it does create a significant step in that direction. So those are the key improvements that were agreed to in 2017. Fast forward to where we are today, the subdivision is currently under development. The purposes of the Second Amendment to the development agreement really are to create specificity and particularly describe the park improvements, the trail improvements, the schedule for completion of the park improvements and trail improvements, the South Collector improvements, and the dedication of those properties to the city for park and trail and the construction of the park and trail as part of those. So those are the key components of this Second Amendment, are really putting some detail to what had been generally discussed in 2017. The biggest pieces of that are, number one, the how park impact fee credits will be given from the city to the developer. That occurs on transfer of ownership, and it occurs only with the developer submitting actual costs for construction of both the park impact, the park improvements and the trail improvements. Those park and trail improvements are hard costs only, not soft costs. And the park and trail improvements that we believe the estimate for what would be eligible for park impact fee credits is approximately $1.55 million in park impact fee credits that would be generated and be earned by this developer upon transfer of the park and trail. For the transportation improvement for the South Collector, 100% of the construction of that collector is not eligible for traffic impact fee credits. Why? Because they already have a responsibility to build neighborhood roads, neighborhood streets in their subdivision. The eligibility for traffic impact fee credits is that delta. It's that level between what they would have already had to do and what they're doing because there's a benefit to the public. And the benefit to the public is not only that we have this collector that gives future connection, the ability for a future connection, but it is also that it is being built cheaper and quicker by a developer than it could be by the public entity. So there is a public benefit associated with that. Thus, the public benefit is what we pay for in traffic impact fee credits. That benefit is about 50% of the cost of that South Collector. So that is what has been negotiated between the developer and the city, that 50% of the cost would be traffic impact fee credit eligible. That amount is approximately $1.1 million. So those are the dollar figures that we're speaking to. The timing associated with when these improvements are being made, for the park improvements especially, they're really tied to when homes are being built. There are multiple phases within this subdivision, and the conversation and negotiation between the city and the subdivision developer were, at what point did it make sense to assure that those park amenities were in place for the people who are moving in to the subdivision. The time frame and the number of houses that had already been built that the city and developer came to was that prior to the 101st home being built, that their construction on the park would take place, that it would begin, and that construction on the park amenities would be completed within 12 months of beginning the work so that it didn't drag out, that you actually do see those park improvements completed. If that does not occur, there is a bond that would be held that would then be activated where the city would complete those improvements ourselves and activate that bond. So those are kind of some of the timing elements of it and getting some finer points to that. The last piece of it that really there is not consensus at this time yet on is who's going to own and maintain that park. And we have multiple options for that we see in the city of Ridgefield already. The ownership interest that is in the packet for you and in the draft development agreement this evening is that the city would take on ownership of that park and that the HOA for Sanderling Park would take on the expense for maintenance of that park. That is a model that we have used in other park and open space areas around the city, including Seven Wells, where we have open space and trails areas where the city owns the parcels, but the maintenance responsibility rests with the subdivision HOA. However, the developer had suggested that this may be an undue burden for the homeowners in that area and had suggested an alternate solution where the city might own the park and thus have our ownership interest as required by law to provide park impact fee credits, but that the city would also maintain the park. And if the level of service for that maintenance dipped below the level it exists at when they transfer ownership, that then if the HOA is desiring to bring that back up to that 100% level, that it would be their responsibility and their cost to do that. Basically saying the city would have the responsibility to maintain it. If the city's not able to take care of it in the way that the HOA wants it to be maintained, the HOA has to pay the bill for that. So that's a suggestion that came from Polish Homes, which is the developer and builder of Sanderling Park. There are other options, alternatives that exist that can be brought to bear and that we could apply to this. Certainly the HOA could own and maintain it with a permanent access easement to the public, but it doesn't really solve the issue associated with the undue burden of the maintenance costs for the HOA brought up by the developer builder. The city could own and maintain the park and then have a contribution to that maintenance cost come from the HOA. The easy example of that is a subdivision you will be hearing about very shortly, which is Paradise Point. Paradise Point subdivision, the park is going to be owned by the city, maintained by the city, with a contribution toward maintenance from the HOA. That's Paradise Point's version of how they do things. So there are multiple ways that we can get to that, but that is one aspect of this development agreement that there is not consensus between the city and the developer, and we are certainly seeking council's guidance on that. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the Second Amendment to this development agreement, but I will leave it at what I've stated so far.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stewart. Okay, council, questions or comments on the DA in general, and then more specifically, your direction for how the park will be maintained in conjunction with the HOA. Mr. Davis, looks like you're going for it.
Yeah, oh yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I sort of gravitate towards the model that's going to be used at Paradise Point. We have, I mean, for one, if the city's going to own the park, there's a certain degree of liability involved with it. And I know that especially in the last, couple of years, we've been ramping up our efforts to make sure that our maintenance department, our parks maintenance department is trained to be able to maintain these somewhat specialty facilities, right? And that is going to be probably different than the maintenance that might be in place if the HOA was in charge of maintenance. I just feel like keeping it in-house, if we're going to own it and we're going to have a degree of liability for it, to find a reasonable dollar amount with the HOA that they could pay us a sum, and that could then become part of our park maintenance routine, and it's the trained professionals. I mean, we send people out for training to this, and I have seen the book. that they have got to memorize, and it is not thin. I mean, it is more than, measuring devices and things like that. I mean, it's an involved thing, and so I just feel like if we have that, that's what we should be using.
Okay, great, thanks. We'll go to Councilor Favela, and then we'll go to Councilor Burkle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we take ownership of this park, then ultimately we're providing the maintenance for it. When we were doing our budget and staffing, do we have enough staff for this? Are we going to have to hire someone? And will we have to do a budget amendment for that?
So we haven't done a formal analysis of the staffing need associated with this park. That's something, if this model that you're speaking to is what you would like to have us pursue, between first and second reading, we would work with our operations and maintenance staff to look at how much they would expect it would take to provide the maintenance for this park. We do have a good idea of the amenities that will be in the park. There's a full detailed summary of what will be there, so that should give us a good idea of how much time it would take to maintain it. As a comparison, for Paradise Point Park, which is much bigger, it's a 15-acre park versus 2.5 acres, but we had anticipated a half FTE would be necessary to maintain that park, and then the Paradise Point HOA is then going to contribute half of the costs of that half FTE. So for this, it would certainly be significantly less than that, but it also depends on what amenities are in it. So that's something we would want to work with our staff on between now and second reading to get you a clear understanding of what those costs might be. My expectation would be we would not be bringing back a budget amendment associated with this, but if it is something that would create additional work that we do not have staffing for, it is something that we would want to think about as we move forward for next year's budget. Because this is something that, again, this park, the necessity for this to be completed would not be until 12 months after it started, and it would not start until just before the 101st home was submitted for final plat. So it will be at least some time before this begins.
Okay, we'll go to Councilor Burkle and then Mayor Pro Tem Chipman.
No. Mr. Steve answered.
Oh, he did, okay. Skip you then. Okay.
So, Mr. Stewart, I asked you this question yesterday, but for the public's sake, I want to ask you again. So when the city maintains a park and takes ownership of it, that means that everyone in the city has the right to use that park, is that correct?
Absolutely correct.
So I was thinking about this later, and I think we need to make that known to the public. I bet there's a lot of people in the city that have no idea that they have the right and the ability to use these parks then when we own them. And so I know this park is a long way from being, ready to be used, but I think it'd be nice if the city was aware then that those parks were available for families to use. I just wanted to mention that, so thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Great, okay. Other question, Councilor Hamilton.
Yeah, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Chipman. I think that is, I would absolutely have no idea that was a possibility prior to this. I do think it's important for the HOA to have some skin in the game. I think that partnership makes sense to me too, but those residents are going to be the main users of that park until we get more information out. So I think that partnership makes sense to me.
Great, okay. Councilor Wells?
Yeah, I agree with that also, but I have one question back on a couple, 3 maps on that easterly road that runs east to west. Yeah, that picture will take care of it there. The westerly end of it, that's only going to be a half road, correct?
Correct.
Okay, what about the section that goes over around the pond there? Is that a single lane road or a double?
That's full width collector.
And then it goes back down to a full width collector clear to the property line on the east end?
Full width collector goes, and you can kind of see it diving to the southeast, and it stubs on the south side of that property. And then there are neighborhood streets that then come off of that to the north of that on the east side.
And that's a 2-lane road?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
That was what my question was. Because if we do extend that road on over to 219th, or the it'd be the westerly extension of 219th, I see where the adjoining property owner will have to do the other half on the westerly edge of it. But my question was, is we're going to have the infrastructure in there for a full lane road if it connects there on the easterly end. Okay.
We
thank
will,
you.
and the reason that that western portion is a half-width roadway instead of the full width is because the configuration of the roadways and the spacing between their intersections with Hillhurst that they already had made it very difficult for them to actually put a full-width roadway on the far south side.
Right, and connect with 239th.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? I just have one. Like, it was interesting seeing that like the city would own it, the HOA may hold the expense for maintenance, or if the city fails to maintain it to standards, then the HOA can take over. Is there ever a situation where the city has failed to take care of a park like this to standards? I mean, it doesn't really feel on brand to us.
It is definitely not on brand, and I'm only hesitating because it kind of depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as park maintenance standards, do we let our parks dip below our parks maintenance standards? Incredibly rare that has occurred, and it's something that is remediated almost immediately. So it is something that is not common in Ridgefield. It's simply a recognition of, okay, if that occurred, what happens?
Yeah.
I think is why they would put that language forward.
Is there a generally accepted standard to like who tends to take care of a neighborhood park better, to HOA or the city, or is it kind of negligible?
Ultimately, the eyes on it and the ones who are most responsible for it and responsive to it are the ones who live closest to it. So as with just about any other park, is that the calls that we get for park maintenance and for work that needs to be done, for people going out there and wanting to do volunteering, vast majority of that are the people who live closest to it because they benefit the most from those parks and they see it more often. But as far as who does a better job of maintaining it, our parks maintenance staff, our maintenance staff do amazing work. So I would put them up against any private HOA.
You should have a challenge. That's great. Okay, thank you. Council, any other questions or comments on this before we open the public hearing? Okay. I will now open the public hearing to receive testimony. This public hearing is now open. If you sign up with the city clerk before the meeting, your name will be called and you will receive permission to unmute your microphone or step up to the podium. If you did not sign up in advance but would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on your toolbar. If you're joining from the phone, press *9 to raise your hand or *6 to mute or unmute. The city clerk will grant you permission to speak. When speaking, please state your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes. There will be no back and forth discussion between the council. This public hearing is now open. Do we have any public comments?
Mayor, we don't have anyone sign up, but Mike Morse with Polish Homes is online and would like to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and the council. I appreciate this opportunity, and City Manager Steve, I appreciate you putting together this presentation. I just wanted to address the final point regarding a polished community and how we work with city jurisdictions with respect to city parks. We specialize in master plan communities, multi-phase master plan communities like Standerling Park. And most of the time, when we are developing city parks, we are putting in the improvements and we are dedicating it to the city. The city is taking over ownership and maintenance. And we, in most cases, provide some language, as Mr. Stewart was alluding to, regarding if it doesn't meet certain standards, we would like an opportunity to contribute to upgrading the maintenance. Although we'd like to have that information available to us, we have not had a situation where a jurisdiction has not performed according to what a polished community of what, the high standards that we carry in a polished community. And so we have not had to, I guess, take action on our desire to come in and upgrade any of the park improvements or maintenance, because the city jurisdictions have done their part in keeping the maintenance of the parks. So I just wanted to add that. since Mr. Mayor brought that point up right here at the end. Any questions for me?
No, none at this time. Thank you for your comment, though.
Okay.
Okay, great. Is there anybody else wishing to make a comment during this public hearing? Anybody else? Miss Julie, anybody else online?
Not seeing anyone online, Mayor.
Okay, hearing none, this public hearing is now closed. Miss Julie, would you please read the ordinance into the record?
Thank you, Mayor. Ordinance number 1442, ordinance of the City of Richland, Washington, approving the Second Amendment to the development agreement with Polish Homes at Centerling Park for park, trail, and road dedication and allocation of impact fee credits.
Great, thank you. Okay, and this is first hearing only, and this will be coming back to council in a couple of weeks at the earliest. Thank you. Okay, we will move on with our agenda. There is another public hearing tonight. This is first reading for ordinance number 1444, the Second Amendment to Paradise Point Development Agreement. Mr. Stewart, back to you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council and the community. Before you this evening is the Second Amendment to the Paradise Point Development Agreement. This development agreement was part of a 2016 development pre-annexation agreement, and in 2023 there was a First Amendment to the development and pre-annexation agreement, and that was to construct and dedicate to the city certain road, park, and trail improvements as part of the Paradise Point PUD subdivision. This amendment, the Second Amendment to the development agreement, really, as we just saw with the last Second Amendment to the development agreement, puts a finer point on the detail. In the 2023 First Amendment, there was a lot of discussion about the park amenity that would occur and the east-west collector, the crossing between the west and east sides of Paradise Point subdivision, and the frontage improvements. And what we have seen since that time is a lot of that activity is occurring. A lot of the construction of the east-west collector and of the frontage improvements on Royal Road and the master plan for the park that was completed and adopted by council in December of 2024 and the budget associated with that, those have all been further refined and developed. So the purposes of this Second Amendment are really to clean it up. One of the things that we find with development agreements, especially when there are meticulous details addressed within them, is when we implement those development agreements, when our planning staff is interpreting them, reviewing to them, working with the developers and the builders to make sure that everybody is on the same page. The cleaner we can make those developer agreements and the more specific we can make them, the easier it is to interpret. The less subjectivity there is, the less there is to try to figure out. So that's what this is about. This Second Amendment is really meant to clean it up a little bit. It cleans up the park impact fee credits that are able to be attributed to the 15 acres of dedicated community park property that was approved at a base rate of $250,000 per acre for the total of $3.75 million. It cleans up that just over $2 million in park impact fee credits represent the anticipated construction costs associated with park and trail improvements, and that as of this agreement, approximately 700,000 of those improvements have already occurred, leaving just over $1.3 million in park impact fee credits. That is the budget available for the first phase of development of the park that the master plan entails. And then for the transportation improvements, it specifies an anticipated budget of just over $4.5 million for the transportation impact fee credits that are available for the collector level roadway that goes beyond what would be necessary otherwise, including a crossing over the old farm pond that is a centerpiece of the 15-acre park and is under construction right now. So as far as timing goes, it lets us know a little bit more about where we're at and where we're headed. It specifies June 1 as a completion date for the crossing, which is, and we have representatives from the developer here, but they are well on track to do. They have started the work to develop and finalize budget and plan for the park and have timelines associated with that to have that done by the end of this year. So we have a better sense of what to expect when, and how much it's going to cost. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the detail contained within the Second Amendment, but again, a lot of this is administrative and simply really crossing our T's and dotting our I's and recognizing the progress that has already been made. So again, happy to answer any questions that you have and would request that you open the public hearing and then ask staff any further questions as you have them.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Council, prior to going into public hearing, is there any questions or comments about these DA amendments? Anybody here? Okay, that's easy. We have none. So we will go ahead and go straight to public hearing. I will now open the public hearing. If you sign up with the city clerk before the meeting, your name will be called and you will be receive permission to mute or unmute or to unmute your microphone or step up to the podium. If you did not sign up in advance but would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on your toolbar. If you're joining by the phone, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute. The city clerk will grant you permission to speak. When speaking, please state your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes, and there will be no back and forth between the council. This public hearing is now open. Is there anybody wishing to give comment during this public hearing?
Good evening, Mayor Cole, Council. Thank you. My name is Kevin Miller. I'm with HSR Capital. I'm the construction manager, and I've been the project manager at Paradise Point since its inception. Mr. Stewart gave kind of a broad update on where we're at on two of the finer things on this project. As the boots on the ground guy, I want to just give you an update, like an actual construction update of where we're at, mainly on the park and the bridge itself. I don't know how often you guys get out there, but it's pretty cool to see the way that bridge is going. It's my first bridge, so it's really exciting for me. That project has been amazing. I know that we're really proud of it. But as you can see out there, I think every day it changes. We're making great progress. We really effectively got off the ground on the bridge right around the first of the year. Most recently, you saw the forms peeled back, and we've got the concrete abutments sitting out there. The next thing that's going to happen is you'll start to see big steel girders come in the next few weeks and see those start to span across the creek. Then we'll build the road deck, finish all that off. So I anticipate right now that we're in pretty good shape, still on track. Probably have that thing open in the next 60 to 90 days, I would estimate. The park process is going really well. We're getting great collaboration and work from Chuck's team and Corey. I think we're getting real narrow on the engineering and hope to have that first phase engineering approved and ready to go in the next couple weeks. I anticipate we'll start moving dirt shortly after that. And I think once we actually start construction on that, it's not going to be long. My goal would be to have that first phase complete in the neighborhood of 60 to 90 days. So I'm really looking forward to maybe early July, end of July at the latest to have that first phase of the park complete. So I just want to give you guys a boots on the ground update. And if you have any questions, I'm willing to answer them. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for your comment. Anybody else wishing to give comment during this public hearing? Miss Julie, anybody online?
Not seeing anyone online, Mayor.
Okay, seeing none, this public hearing is now closed. Miss Julie, would you read the ordinance into the record?
Thank you, Mayor. Ordinance number 1444, an ordinance of the City of Ridgefield approving the Second Amendment to the Development Agreement with HSR Development Paradise LLC for road, park, and trail improvement, dedication, maintenance, and allocation of impact fee credits.
Great, thank you. Okay, and council, this is first reading only. However, due to the nature of it, we do have the option to waive second. So if anybody would like to do that, you can go ahead and make that motion.
I just got a question first.
Yeah.
Two questions. First part, how many lots are in this development? Does anybody have that number? 260?
But 283, I think, is the number that we have in our.
Okay.
294. 294.
Okay, yeah. 294.
Okay, that answers that. And one other question, I was just wondering if the bridge is going to be called the Miller Bridge over Allen Creek?
So naming of things like bridges is an excellent thing for councils to consider. So once that bridge is done and dedicated, if you would like to consider naming, we can certainly start a naming process for you.
I heard that comment earlier in the testimony, so that's
Oh,
why
yeah.
I brought that up.
Yeah, somebody's been fishing for it, that's for sure.
I'll make a motion that we waive second reading.
Okay, there's,
So the motion would be to waive second and adopt the ordinance. So you kind of have to do both
yeah,
of
just
those
all in
things.
one. Yeah.
Okay, I make a motion, we waive second reading and adopt the ordinance, number 1444. Oh,
44.
44.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to waive second reading and adopt ordinance number 1444 as presented. Council, any additional discussion on this? Is this a roll call?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes.
Councilmember Favela.
Yes.
Councilmember Wells.
Yes.
Councilmember Burkle.
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chipman.
Yes.
Mayor Cole.
Yes. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you very much, council. Okay, and we have a final public hearing tonight. This is the first reading of ordinance number 1446. And I apologize if I misspeak this name. This is a petition to annex for the Mookensnable property. Ms. Lust.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and good evening again to members of the public. The item before you is a petition to annex. Petition to annex is subject to a public hearing, so there will be a hearing on this topic. Action is not requested at this meeting, and we'll come back to you at a later date. So the petition to annex is for one property shown before you in the Carty Road sub-area. It's on the northern edge of the western part of the Carty Road sub-area. It is adjacent to the southern phases of the Clover Hill planned unit development. The property is 5.8 acres. So process-wise, this proposal went through an intent to annex in September 2024 when Council adopted resolution number 653 approving the intent to annex for this property, which authorized the applicant to move forward with the petition to annex process. The requirement for the petition to annex is to obtain signatures of owners representing 60% or more of the land value of the proposed annexation area. One property owner, well, two property owners, but one parcel. So they have signed the petition to annex, achieving 100%. So that threshold is exceeded. Staff sent the proposed, the signed petition, the applicant's survey and legal description of the property to the Clark County Assessor's Office, who reviewed the proposal and issued a signed certification of sufficiency on January 15th of this year. So we are now at the point in the process for any question or discussion from council, as well as a public hearing. I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Lust. Okay, council, any questions or comments on this this item?
Yeah.
Just a clarification. You said it's the northwest corner of Carty. What other road might it abut? I'm having a difficult time.
So, yes, Counselor, it's in the northwest portion of the Carty Road sub-area. It's very close to Royal Road. Royal Road is just to the west there, the diagonal line on the map. Carty Road is to the south. The property is accessed from Carty Road via Mueller Road.
Thank you.
Great. Anybody on my left side have any questions or comments? Okay, we'll go over this way. Council, oh, no? Okay, cool. I have a couple of questions kind of related to that. So like right now you access it, the single access point to this property is off of Mueller Road. But Mueller Road is not really like it's, what would you classify that as? It's not a.
It's a private road.
Oh, it is a private road, okay. So what is the plan for accessing this in the future? Is it going to be built, because like they have to build out services, there's going to be an urban holding until the services are built out. So where would access points be in that area?
Correct. So annexation of this property would not lift urban holding. It would still have the urban holding overlay on it. For urban holding to be lifted, infrastructure that would support urban development has to be available to the property. So a couple things there. First of all, this property and the annexed properties between it and Carty Road, each of the property owners have indicated in their annexation applications that the intent is to develop.
Okay.
So at this time, it is my expectation that we would be seeing some sort of development application, including multiple of those properties, accessed from Carty Road. Second part of that is that with the Carty Road development standards having been adopted, our next step as staff, Mr. Green and I, are going to be working on getting the folks representing those properties that have been annexed together to work on an integrated infrastructure plan to get to a point where urban holding could be lifted. So that is a question that will be addressed through that process.
Okay, great, thank you. Councilor Davis.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I wanted to visit, we got an email earlier that there's a property line that's being contested. How would that impact this decision?
So I haven't had time to fully research that issue, but that is something we will look into and provide council the information you need before we bring this back for any action.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, council, any other questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing. If you sign up with the city clerk before the meeting, your name will be called and you will receive permission to unmute your microphone or step up to the podium. If you did not sign up in advance but would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on your toolbar. If you are joining from the phone, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute. The city clerk will grant you permission to speak. And when speaking, please state your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes. There will be no back and forth discussion with the city council. This public hearing is now open. Anybody wishing to make a comment during this public hearing? Nobody in the room. Ms. Julie, is there anybody online?
Nobody online, Mayor.
Okay. Seeing none, one final chance. Okay, I am going to close this public hearing. Ms. Julie, please read the ordinance into the record.
Ordinance number 1446, ordinance of the City of Richfield, Washington, annexing into the corporate limits of the City of Ridgefield approximately 5.8 acres identified as the Mookensnibel annexation area and assigning the zoning of the annexed areas residential low density 4 with the urban holding 10 overlay.
Great, thank you, Ms. Julie. This is first reading only, and we'll come back to council at a later date. Okay, that concludes our public hearings and our business items for the evening, so we will move into public comment. Anybody wishing to address the council regarding the items not subject to a public hearing may come forward to the podium at this time, or use the raise hand feature located on the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. For controls over the phone, press *9 to raise your hand and press *6 to mute or unmute. Please state your name and limit comment to 3 minutes.
My name is Michael Jennings. City leaders, thank you for your thoughtful and careful and logical management of Ridgefield. Thanks again.
Thank you again. Yeah. Anybody else wishing to make a public comment in the room tonight? Seeing none. Ms. Julie, anybody online?
Not seeing anyone, Mayor.
Okay, we will close public comment and move on to council, presiding officer, and staff reports. Let's go ahead and start with Councilor Davis.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Had a busy couple of weeks. Just a couple days after our last meeting, I had a blast doing the Color Run. That is a fundraiser for the PTA for, let's see, Sunset Ridge and View Ridge schools. right down here at Overlook Park. And it's always, I mean, stuff like that's always fun to me, but just seeing Overlook Park being used, I think Councilor Burkle had mentioned it. It's just sort of like the living room of the city, and everything kind of happens there. And, you know, we've all been to all these different events, and, you know, this one started off with a bunch of colored powder going up in the air and then, you know, running. And so it was a lot of fun. It was fun to support the kids and see a lot of families out there. Did not come in first place. So, sorry.
You finished
about
pretty
that,
fast,
guys.
though.
Yeah. Let's see. I did attend RTC meeting on behalf of the mayor since he was not able to make it, and provide you guys a rundown of what happened at that meeting. But a lot of it came down to some of the issues going on with federal funding, state funding. A lot of people know there's $1 billion shortfall in the transportation budget they're trying to figure out. And so as a regional transportation council, obviously that's something they're paying a lot of attention to. But moving forward with, you know, work plans with priority projects and things like that. Let's see, we had our work session on Thursday. This last Saturday, I also did another race. I did a 5K, and this one was very special. It was my first time volunteering with the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes. And so this 5K that I did, I was a guide for a blind athlete. And to tell you the truth, it was so, I had a blast doing it. And the gentleman that I was paired up with, we had a ton of things in common. He had worked in government affairs and advocacy and things like that. And so we spent basically the whole 5K like talking about stuff and movies and all sorts of things. But it was very rewarding to be able to do that. We're doing it again in a couple of weeks for Vancouver's Couve Clover Run. And not that it does make a difference, but I can report that we were the first to cross the finish line.
Heck yeah.
So there is that. Not quite what it's about, but that did happen. So that was incredibly rewarding. Thursday night, there was a C-Trend meeting. You guys know we are the alternate this year, so I was not a part of the meeting, but certainly keeping tabs on that. Their big issue that's related to the bridge project was tabled until next month, and so I'm sure they'll stay on my radar for at least another month, and look forward to giving you guys updates on that front as well. And then earlier today, I had the privilege of, with all the rest of you, attending the Iris Awards, which is a lunch that recognizes just very accomplished and inspiring female leaders in our community. And our very own Chief Dorrit was one of 6 finalists to receive this award, and it was downtown at the Hilton. It was packed, and you know, they choose a handful of winners among the finalists, and I feel just thrilled that I get to be the one that says that Chief Dorrit was one of the winners. And we were all, I'll tell you, if you like, the pride that came out of our table was immense, and we're so thrilled for you, and it was well deserved. And you know, congratulations are definitely in order. And the best part is we know you don't do this to receive those types of things, so that's why it's so special to see you get recognized in such a great way. So congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a busy couple of weeks for myself as well. I volunteered at the Wine Walk event. That was super fun. I got to see a lot of faces from last year. And then I also learned something about myself. I have this really awkward go-to pose for pictures, and now like every year at the Wine Walk, it's this same like, I don't know where that came from or why I do that. I'm gonna work on it now that I'm aware that that's what I do. We filmed some more takes for the State of the City, which is happening next Tuesday, so I hope to see everybody there. I had my first onboarding. It was a 2-hour-long onboarding meeting for the Community Action Advisory Board that I was appointed to. This is an advisory board that advocates on behalf of people who are low income at the state and federal levels, just to make sure that services are available and equitable. I attended the ECHO meeting. There are updates on severe weather as we head into spring, later into summer, with cooling centers, and then planning sessions with CRESA, who is the regional emergency services. When you call 911, CRESA is who answers your phone call. Brainstorming on fire and smoke, that's new. So they're creating a crisis plan for that. And then there was some updates with proposed bills that would impact the community in general regarding housing and some mental health. And then we also discussed Governor Ferguson's budget cuts over the next biennium, and then what services would be impacted from those budget cuts. Tonight I had the Fire Commission meeting. It sounds like on the March 24th, there will be an open public meeting regarding TIF. So that's traffic impact fees as it relates to the fire department. It will be at 6 p.m. I do plan on attending that meeting. There were some conversations regarding EMS and the contract. So they have a contract now until the end of 2025. The plan is to kind of piggyback off of the one that from Vancouver, to continue, but if that doesn't happen, they'll do an RFP for those services. And then, as we heard from Chief Jackson, the Tribal Foundation has purchased 2 additional ambulances. So that's a total of 3, which I believe is a little over $1 million of donation via ambulances to the department, and that is a huge gift, not only to the department, but our entire community. Let's see, they have 7 new employees starting March 17th, and then there will be a graduation ceremony at Ridgefield High School June 24th for all of the new firefighters that are coming out of academy. The department was offered a home off of Pioneer to do a training burn. Super exciting. Those are always really good. I also hear they're trying to get clearance for elected officials to maybe be involved. So I'm like, fingers crossed. My son is also a fire cadet at Clark Cowlitz, so it could be really cool that him and I are like in a burning building together.
What? Crazy.
Oh my gosh, that would be great. Anyway, sorry. I like really got excited about that. Anyway, and then today I also attended the HER conference, which is hosted by the Greater Vancouver Chamber. As Councilman Davis said, Chief, our very own City of Ridgefield Chief won. This is a prestigious honor for women in leadership, both in all of Southwest Washington that make lasting impacts, and it was truly an honor to be there. Lots of tears. Those little cloth napkins were really good for catching them, and it was just, it was so cool to watch you be so uncomfortable doing what you hate doing, getting your picture taken in front of a bunch of people. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay. Counselor Wells, we'll go to you.
Okay, along with probably the rest of us, we, on the first, was the first Saturday. Also, we had filming for the State of the City program that's going to be coming up later next month in April. The sixth?
Next week.
Next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, next week, okay. Really? Yeah. Thanks for telling me. No. On the 6th, we had a council workshop. The 12th is a briefing, and this morning, Ridgefield was at its best again, celebrating the chief. And when she was announced, all 9 people at the Ridgefield table stood up, and we were in the prime again. Our council is supporting the people of our community and our staff, and I know it was well noted, as that we've always done in the past, And I didn't see anybody else stand up that much when the other two participants were awarded that same prestigious, can't find the word I'm looking for, moment, yeah, whatever. And I had one, and then I had one question. On March 24th, you said, was the fires deal, is that in conflict with the City of Vancouver, State of the City?
6 p.m. It's, yeah, 6 p.m.
Yeah,
It is.
they're both of them.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
So we-
unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so we won't be able to, I mean, we gotta pick and choose. That was it. That's all.
Great, thank you, Counselor. Counselor Burkle.
Thank you. Just a few things. Study session with Mr. Stewart, always a pleasant experience. City manager briefing with Mr. Stewart. Port meeting the other day, they're working for an agreement between the Washington State Community Economic Revitalization Board and the Port of Ridgefield for aid in financing the cost of public facilities consisting of the Greeley Building. They also talk about they still have 5 lots to be cleaned from when the pole yard was functioning downtown. They're hoping to get that started by July the 1st. I too would like to thank our chief for what was truly a remarkable achievement today. I found it very interesting to sit at our table and there wasn't a dry eye when your name was announced. It was truly, truly remarkable. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Counselor Hamilton, good to see you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So this week was fun. My 2 weeks, first official 2 weeks. I was really excited to shoot part of the State of the City. Mayor Cole was gracious enough to introduce me. And that was really fun. And then I went and joined Councilor Favela at the Wine Walk, so I got to talk to a lot of people and learn all about Ridgefield Roundabout Red. You know, I feel like pretty expertise now. And then I attended the school board meeting this week. I would say there was a general tone of anxiousness regarding federal funding and keeping an eye on that, and 25-26 budget numbers, and doing everything possible to limit any reduction in force while ensuring like fiscal responsibility and sustainability was really important and a big message of the meeting. So I know that the board members had to vote on a resolution that was tough for them, but it was to maintain the health of our school district, which is so important. And on a much lighter note, I wanted to give a shout out and recognize someone that they honored that evening that I was particularly touched by. Her name is Margie Stoner. She's retiring from the Ridgefield Family Resource Center, and 15 years ago, she learned of students that were going hungry on the weekends and immediately contacted a counselor at Union Ridge and her church and got to work. And it started with 7 kids that she would create weekend bags for and personally drop them off to the schools. And now they're up to 93, and they have to replace her with a team of people at the church because she just did so much work on her own. And I just thought that, like, what a beautiful testament to, like, love, really showing love for your community. And someone that absolutely didn't want to be recognized either. She was like, please stop looking at me. I just want to help people. And I thought she deserved really another shout out. And then this afternoon was so awesome. I'm really looking forward to our meeting next week, Chief. And nothing I love more than being in a room full of powerful women. I think that the energy of that is incredible and very well deserved, and it was awesome. So thank you.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Counselor. Okay, I'll try and go quickly. I have quite a few things I wanted to run by. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right, Mayor Pro Tem. I said I'd skip you, and then I really skipped you. I apologize.
Okay, so first of all, I want to recognize Mr. Johnson because when we were up at the state conference about 3 weeks ago now in Olympia, the state auditor spoke at one of the sessions that we were at, and she said if you are in a city that has not had an audit, that has found a lot of issues, she said you need to go back to your city and thank your financial director because he or she is obviously doing a great job. And she told of some of the horror stories that go on in cities, so we truly, truly appreciate you and the work that you do here with your team and the honors that you get from it. So I wanted to be sure, you were gone last council meeting, so I couldn't say it then. So, but thank you so much for the work that you do, yeah. Let's see here. I've had a pretty interesting couple weeks. Got to go to DC with Mr. Stewart and Mayor Cole, and that was a very interesting 3 days. Lots of uncertainty going on in DC, and I don't know if it's going to end very soon, but who knows what kind of funding we're going to get, what's been offered or whatever. So, but it was a very interesting trip, and I was really excited to get to go and had a great time. Attended the Clark Regional Wastewater District meeting on Tuesday. Sounds like there's going to be some kind of a change as far as they're making a connecting Ridgefield now to Salmon Creek. Is that correct? Yeah, and disconnecting from the.
I'll find out tomorrow.
Okay, all right. So I knew you would know the true story. So that's going on with them. Let's see here. I've done quite a few other things, but I can't really remember all of it, so I didn't write it all down. But anyway, which culminated with the Iris Awards today. So that was the highlight. Okay, that's it for me.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. And from my end, I'll jump on with the rest of council just because it's so noteworthy, but the Iris Awards today was a pretty meaningful celebration. And Chief, it's just such an honor to have you a part of our city. It's a privilege to serve with you, and thank you for everything you do. Very much deserved, so bravo. Earlier this week, I attended a Urban County Policy Board meeting. This is where we select the community development block grants for the year, and so local jurisdictions from around the area, as well as different nonprofits, will submit proposals for awards. There's a lot of uncertainty from federal funding. This is a federally funded grant, and there's a lot of uncertainty in that as well. However, they were able to award their grants for the year. Unfortunately, Ridgefield did not score high enough on this one. But this is also, I think, the first year that, I think since I've been on council, I can remember that we haven't received a CDBG award, but it's okay, because I think we have a couple of projects still in process. But better luck next year, and I just am really hoping that there's some really good projects out there, and I'm really hoping that the funding is retained there, because these are doing some really good stuff in different communities, and so we want to see those go through. There's been an interesting story this week, and if you're on Facebook, you might have seen it, but our very own Sergeant Marvitz was able to jump in and help. There's a young man in Battleground who was having some trouble, had kind of run off. They weren't able to find him. Battleground Police called in Ridgefield Police Support, and Sergeant Marvitz was able to kick up the drone and was able to find him and return him home safely. And the video from that drone footage is online. If you get a chance to see it, it's kind of cool. This is a drone program that this council approved last year, and so it's good to see it being put to good use, and thank you to Sergeant Marvitz for his quick action on that. And I tell that story because I have had a similar situation. I have a brother with autism who around that same area a few years ago had kind of a similar situation, and it was kind of a scary moment having somebody who is kind of in distress and looking for a place to go, but wandering down 503, which is a very busy highway, and made us all nervous. But we were able to return him home, not with the help of a drone, but it's good to have that, and I think that happened a lot sooner. So congrats to RPD and BGPD for their work on that. Let's see what else really quick that I wanted to touch on. Yes, with Mayor Pro Tem and the City Manager Stewart, we were in Washington, D.C. last week seeking federal support on several projects we have on our federal legislative agenda. Those items include 11th Street overpass. This is something we've been trying to get design funds for a number of years. We had some really productive meetings. I felt like we made some progress. Had some really good insights from a couple of Senate staffs, as well as Marie Glusenkamp-Perez's chief of staff. Had a really good conversation with him. He's a local government guy and totally understands where we're at and is trying to help us. So the 11th Street overpass is one. South I-5 connection is another one that we're seeking funding for. And then the last one is the last stretch of South Royal Road, which is, as you know, is not done. And so we were seeking about $3 million to support the last money in that would get that project done. And so while there's still a lot of uncertainty about federal funding, and it looks like the continuing resolution that was just passed by the House will continue funding the government at current levels from last year and through September. That potentially puts some, another grant that we'd hopefully receive potentially in jeopardy. We're waiting to see there, but really hoping to pull through on that and hoping that Congress can get its act together to actually fund the government. And then, there's a lot of needs there. So can't say I'm optimistic, but I am hopeful. And then lastly, I just did want to make a plug for State of the City, which is happening this coming Tuesday, March 18th. Yes. There's going to be a reception at 5 p.m. And then the event begins at 6 p.m. We will be doing, again, for our third year in a row, our Make a Difference Awards. This has probably become my favorite part of the event. We have nominees, 3 nominees for individuals who have made a difference in our community over the last year, and then 3 organizations who are making a difference. And so we will present those nominations and then present the final awards to each of those categories. And then we'll get on to the State of the City address. So that's 5 p.m., doors open. Come join us. There will have city staff will have booths set up, and there's lots of information there. And then join us in the auditorium at Ridgefield High School, the Performing Arts Center. We would love to have you there, love to see you, and share all the updates of what our city has been up to over the past year, where we've been, and the challenges we're facing, where we're going, and just our vision for this council's vision for the future. So with that, Mr. Stewart, turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council and the community. In the interest of time and recognizing that we have an executive session that we need to do after this, I just wanted to piggyback on what everybody has said as far as our IRIS Award-winning police chief. Individually and collectively, you have amazing people who serve this community and do so with love and dedication because they care. And there are very few people that I have met who care more about Ridgefield, the community, our safety, our people, than Chief Doria. So we're blessed to have her. We're blessed to have a team that she works with that is equally caring. And elsewhere, in the city team, we're also blessed to have award-winning folks like our finance department, which also received award recently, and it is the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the Government Finance Officers Association for the 2025 budget. This is the 8th consecutive year that our finance department and our city have won this prestigious award. The first year we won it, we were the smallest city in Canada and US that actually achieved this award, and Mr. Johnson and his team have continued that for the past 8 years. So deserve tremendous kudos for assuring that the people know how their dollars are being spent every year. So we're blessed to have a great group of people that we get to work with and that are working for us. So I just want to say thank you to all of our team. And thank you, council, for all your support in making sure that we have that team to do the work. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. And with that, we'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Okay, great. Council, any questions for City Manager Stewart? Okay, seeing none. Okay, we can move on. Great. Mr. Green.
So first I want to echo Councilor Hamilton's kudos to Margie Stoner. I happen to go to church with her. It's the Methodist Church. And we are celebrating her achievements and what all she has done for the Family Resource Center this Sunday at service. So you're all welcome to come. And in true honor, we are asked to bring donations of tuna, peanut butter, or rice cakes, or whatever else that she's been able to garner over the years in that program. Also, when talking about CDBG projects, we are going to have, we've been moving forward on our G Creek Loop project on March 24th, right here, 6 o'clock. We're having an open house for the neighborhood to look at our design, talk about traffic issues and parking. And we actually leafed the neighborhood with these type of flyers today. So we're hoping to get a good turnout of the neighbors to find out what we're planning to do on at G Creek Meadows.
Great.
Mayor, if I might, there's
Please.
somebody else sitting at the table behind me.
Suit over there, yeah.
I don't know, there was an extra seat. I'm not sure there was an extra suit. So I will let him speak for himself and certainly speak to you as a council, but I do want to do my part to introduce Ryan Thamert, who you have seen sitting on that side of the room a lot. He started with us about 9 years ago as a maintenance level 1, has worked up through the organization in public works and has been an amazing asset to this city, is one of those people who cares a ton about what he does every day for the residents of Ridgefield, and has risen to the level of leadership within that organization, and has recently been promoted to be the director of Public Works, Utilities, and Operations, thus the suit, and that he has to sit at this side of the table and not the other. And other than that, I will let him speak for himself and give any updates he has, but yes. A well-deserved promotion from an amazing public servant.
Absolutely. Mr. Thamert, over to you then.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart, Council. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to serve the Ridgefield community in my new role. I do have an update. It's exciting for me to announce that earlier today, the City of Ridgefield was named the best tasting water by the local chapter of our American Water Works Association, and we are now eligible to compete at regionals in Boise, Idaho.
Just, Mr. Thamert can tell you this, but we just heard about this today as well. And Ms. Notneris was talking about it. Can you briefly, City of Vancouver, we're better than them.
Yes.
And better than everybody locally. But they went pretty far before, right?
Yes, I believe the City of Vancouver won last year, nationals. And, oh, they made it to nationals, okay. Sorry. So we went with the intention and goal of trying to dethrone the City of Vancouver, and we won. So, Clark Public Utilities was also there, and there were 7 other jurisdictions that we beat. So.
And I'm guessing Battleground probably is nowhere near on the list, right? For the record.
I think they were competing, but we beat them.
Are
great.
these professional water tasters?
I don't know about their qualifications, but they were third party and independent.
Wow.
Wow.
I'm gonna Google this.
For the sake of time, I'm going to withhold questions, but I do have questions. So, yes, okay.
Happy to answer later if you like.
Council, water competitions aside, any questions for Mr. Thamert?
No, just my congratulations on your recent appointment.
Absolutely.
Well deserved, my friend.
Thank you.
Really happy to have you on that side of the table and in a suit. Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. Mr. Johnson, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess Mr. Thamert's going to get his budget next year. We'll work with him to keep the water quality up and the good taste. That being said, thank you for the comments about what the auditor said. That being said, we do start our next audit in 2 weeks. So we're going to be audited on our financial statements, accountability, which is how we process everything, and then also federal grants as well. And hopefully in coming years, we continue to get federal grant audits, meaning that we are receiving the money. So I'll answer any questions if you have them.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Johnson, Council? Okay, moving on. Ms. Lust.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have anything else this evening.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Lust, Council? Okay, we'll move on. Ms. Notneris. Nothing from Ms. Notneris. Okay. Ms. Parker, are you online? We'll go to you.
Yes, hello, I am here. I hope you can hear me okay, but I don't have anything to report. Just happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Council, any questions for Ms. Parker? Okay. Okay, and then lastly, Chief Doria.
Thank you. You know, either works. Doriot. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 things. One, first of all, it was amazing to have all the support that I had today, both my family and my work family and your support. Just looking out and seeing the council and all of you and Mr. Stewart and Ms. Nutnaris was amazing. So thank you so much for that. Secondly, I want to give a shout out. In addition to the great work done by Sergeant Marvitz, we recently had an Officer Chris Hunt who had a big mail theft investigation of community mailboxes, the big ones that are outside a lot of the developments and outside in the county area. He was able to track down footage from cards that were stolen from those mailboxes and was able to identify a suspect. He then ultimately tracked down that suspect and arrested him and conducted a search warrant for his vehicle, where he recovered hundreds of pieces of mail to include many types of access devices, a check, I think, for $44,000, license plates, a passport, among other things. Those boxes were not broken into. They had replicated a master key of some sort, so there was no sign of a break-in. So anyway, the work that Officer Hunt did to unravel all of that was amazing. He pulled at the threads that easily could have been missed, and he did a fantastic job. He is one of our newest officers, just recently sworn in front of you not that long ago. So he's doing excellent work, and my caution would be is make sure that you're keeping tabs on your credit and things that are happening on your bank accounts for everyone. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Great, thank you, Chief. Any questions from that? Please pass along our thanks to Officer Hunt for that. That's great. Okay. We do have an executive session tonight. This is pursuant to RCW 42.30.144A. This is the collective bargaining sessions with employee organizations, including contract negotiations, grievance meetings, and discussions related to the interpretation or application of a labor agreement. We will go to executive session for 10?
I would say 15 minutes with 5 minutes kind of a latitude, so come back at 9:50.
Okay, council will return at 9:50.
And action will be requested.
Oh yeah, the action will be required afterwards. So. Okay, it's 9:50. Council is returning from executive session. Action will be taken here. So this is regarding our police contract with the Police Officers Guild. So council, any discussion before we move into action on this? See, no discussion. Okay, I would entertain a motion.
So I move to approve the 2025 to 2027 labor agreement between the City of Ridgefield and the Ridgefield Police Officer Association and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement.
I'll second.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded to approve the 2025 to 27 labor agreement between the City of Ridgefield and the Ridgefield Police Officers Association and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement. Council, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries, and this meeting is adjourned.
And we should thank Ms. Nutnaris for all of the work that she has done on this. Huge thank yous, yeah.